Edina Planning Commission meeting of June 13, 2012. My name is Kevin Staunton. I'm the Vice Chair of the Planning Commission. I'm sitting in tonight for Commissioner Grable, who is away. Jackie, can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Scheer?
Here.
Commissioner Forrest? Here. Commissioner Schroeder?
Here.
Commissioner Rock?
Here.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Here.
Commissioner Fisher?
Here.
Chair Staunton?
Present. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the meeting agenda. Any additions or subtractions from the meeting agenda for this evening? Hearing none, I take a motion for approval of the meeting agenda.
So moved.
Second? Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next up is approval of the consent agenda, which includes just the minutes of the regular meeting of the Edina Planning Commission meeting of May 23, 2012. I guess, are there any changes or suggested revisions to the meeting minutes for the 23rd? Good evening, Commissioner Platter. Hearing none, I take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
And a second? Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And the consent agenda is approved. Next up on the agenda is community comment. This is a time for those who are in the audience who would like to bring anything to the Planning Commission's attention that is not on the agenda for this evening. And so if you're here and there is a comment you want to share with us or any other comment, this would be the time to bring it up. If you'd just state your name and address for the record.
I'm Mark Brethheim. I live at 5429 Woodcrest Drive. And,
Good evening.
Pardon?
Good evening.
Hi. We received one of the letters about one of the projects, and this is just more of a general comment because it was a talk about the 1-foot adjustment. And I'm concerned because we're next door to a project a block away from that. And while there's a standard for maximum roof height, there doesn't seem to be any standard for adjusting grade height. So our next door project has raised the grade from 4 feet to 9 feet above the original grade that was there. So we now have their first floor is dead even with our second floor. Our view of Minnehaha Creek is now looking at their air conditioner unit dead even eye level with us looking out the window. And I brought some photos along. I know the roof height was standard was set, so it didn't loom over, but we have actual grade height. We're looking at our backyard at a wall this high out the side of our house now. So
just, Mr. Brethheim, so I'm clear. There's a residence that has been built next to your house.
They're in process of building it right now.
They're in the process, and what you're saying is that the original grade has been raised by several feet.
So apparently the Woodcrest slopes down, so apparently they picked this 1-foot adjustment jogged me because it must be, they started where they were at the far end, and since the 1,000-foot or 1,200-foot houses there is now being replaced by a 4,000-foot house, they've built out another 15 to 20 feet closer to us, so where it stepped up in the series, the garage that used to be next to us was about 4 feet above grade from when we walked out. Now they've taken that and taken the extension from the first floor straight across. So, and they're still not finished. I mean, we've got a wall now that's this high outside our side door, and they're talking about raising it this high. So when we walk out, we're just going to be looking at a stone wall. And by the back on the creek level, it's now 9 foot of stone wall that's gone out into the floodplain in the back. So, I don't understand if there's a max for building a house that looms over, how there isn't a max for putting retaining walls that just loom over neighboring property, just because instead of stepping down the architecture to go in levels to adjust to that grade, they just came straight across and just ended up. So I made 5 sets, but this is.
Well, you know what I'm going to suggest, I think, is that, first of all, I don't know, Carrie, if you're familiar with this at all?
Not off the top of my head, but...
and I assume that for this construction project, there would need to be a building permit issued?
Correct.
And apparently there's, I checked because it said it, when I saw this air conditioner come in, apparently there's no law about, regulation about that. And there's no regulation apparently on retaining walls. You can build them right out to the lot line, whereas you have to have a setback for fence. But the retaining wall can be put out, and apparently there's no height limit. I mean, if they want to put a 20-foot wall next to us, you could, it's just, so apparently there's no code on where you can adjust grade. You can fill in, 25 dump trucks full of clay and build your lot up to wherever you want. That's what it seems like. We got no variance notice at all about this before it went in. But
as you noted at the beginning, we have a couple of items on the agenda for conditional use permits this evening that have to do with this whole notion.
And that's what jogged me about, a 1-foot adjustment. Well, nobody asked us about a 4-foot to 9-foot adjustment
Sure.
next door to us.
So here's what I'm going to suggest. What I think we need to do, it's not something that we're going to be able to address this evening.
Yeah, no, I just thought I'd bring it to your attention because
Right.
apparently there's no code. This 1-foot adjustment apparently is on adjusting from where the original slab or foundation, taking it up a foot. But if the entire yard comes up, there must not be any kind of standard at all to take that into account.
And I can speaking only for myself, I can say that's part of what we worked on to create this 1-foot adjustment. So
Right.
I would be disappointed to find that there isn't, that you can get around that too easily. So what I guess I'm going to suggest is that you share that with staff and that Carrie follow up both in the planning staff and perhaps in the building staff to just kind of understand what's going on. And Carrie, if I can ask you to get back to him once you've had a chance to investigate and get back to the commission and let us know kind of what the story is here.
All right. Should I leave these with you now or just...
Thank you for coming and sharing that. Any further comments during community comment? Seeing none, I'd take a motion to close community comment. And a second? Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Same sign. Community comment is now closed. Next on the agenda is public hearings. We have 4 public hearings this evening, a couple of variances and a couple of conditional use permits. And the first public hearing is a 19.2 and 5.1 foot front yard setback variance to build a new home at 6617 Parkwood Road. Chris, are you going to introduce this for us?
Yes.
Thank you. Let me just say for those who are in the audience, the way that we will proceed on these is we'll have an introduction from staff, and the commission may have some comments and questions for staff, and then once that's concluded, we're going to ask the applicant to come up, share anything that they're interested in sharing, and then after that, we will ask for public comment from interested members of the public, and you'll have 3 minutes to share your comments, and then we'll close the public hearing, and then the Planning Commission will consider each of the applications and make its recommendation or decision.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. The subject property is located at 6617 Parkwood Road. The request is for a 19.2 and a 5.1 foot front yard setback variance. The property is a corner lot. It is just south of Parkwood Road and east of Parkwood Lane, as highlighted. This is an aerial photograph of the area showing the location of the house relative to the other 2 homes adjacent to it. What you'll notice is that the front door of the home is actually facing Parkwood Road with the side wall facing Parkwood Lane. There's a home directly south that fronts Parkwood Lane, and then there's a home directly east that fronts Parkwood Road. The 2 homes on either side dictate the front yard setback along the street frontages. The existing home is currently non-conforming in terms of front yard setback. It is closer both to Parkwood Lane and Parkwood Road than the other 2 homes. Once you remove the home on the subject property, then the front yard setback along Parkwood Lane is dictated by the home to the south, and the front yard setback for the north lot line is dictated by the home to the east. This is the subject home as it exists today. It's a rambler with a tuck-under garage. The house to the south that's along Parkwood Lane, and then also the house that's along Parkwood Road just to the east. This is a survey of the existing home. As you can see, it is closer to Parkwood Lane than the house to the south. The house to the south is a little over 80-some feet away. The subject home is closer than that. It's approximately 62 feet. The front yard setback along Parkwood Lane then, or Parkwood Road, excuse me, is 45.6 feet. The home to the east has a deeper front yard setback. This is the proposed footprint. What is difficult to see is that the proposed home is meant to match the front yard setbacks of the existing home. It is a larger home. It ends up being pushed back further into the property to maintain those existing non-conforming setbacks. Highlighted in red or pink is actually the required setback area, although they would have the choice of either maintaining the side yard setback along their south lot line or their east lot line and their rear yard setback along their south or east lot line. What they've chosen to do is to maintain a 25-foot rear yard setback along the east lot line and a 10-foot side yard setback along the south lot line. So they could potentially have a 25-foot setback along the south and 10 along the east. It still does not provide as much buildable area as the existing house enjoys. This is a survey showing highlighted area of where the existing home is. The new home actually will be a little bit further back from Parkwood Lane than the existing home. The property is well over a half an acre, with the new home occupying less than 17% of the lot area. The new home, while larger than the existing home, is still not proposed to occupy as much land area as allowed by ordinance, which is 25%. The required setbacks for both Parkwood Lane and Parkwood Road unreasonably limit the building area of the lot given the existing non-conforming setbacks provided by the original home. The two homes on either side were actually built at a later date, so they end up dictating the setback of the subject property once it's removed. The existing home was built in 1952 and the other two homes were built approximately a year later. Staff does believe it is reasonable for the owner to duplicate the non-conforming setbacks from the street frontages of the existing home. The home does meet all of the ordinance requirements in terms of height, setback in other directions, as well as lot coverage. This is the first floor, or the basement floor plan, the first floor plan, and then the second floor plan. The primary issue is the proposed development reasonable for the site. Staff believes the proposed is reasonable for four reasons. The proposed use is permitted in the R1 zoning district and complies with all the requirements with the exception of front yard setback, which is currently provided by the existing home. The home is appropriate in size and scale for the lot, and the improvements will enhance the property. It's not even close to the maximum allowable lot coverage requirements. The improvements will provide the same setback from the streets as the existing home. The home is a new two-story walkout with an attached three-car garage and should complement the character of the neighborhood. The home is well within the coverage requirements. Is the proposed variance justified? Will it relieve practical difficulties that prevent a reasonable use from complying with the ordinance requirements? Staff believes that the proposed variance is reasonable given that historically the existing home has provided the non-conforming setbacks since built in 1952. The practical difficulty for the project is that the two adjacent homes were built a year after the subject home and now dictate the required or deeper front yard setback. Are there circumstances that are unique to the property, not common to every similarly zoned property, and they're not self-created? The unique circumstance is the location of the existing home predating the location of the adjacent homes, which is not self-created. Will the variance alter the essential character of the neighborhood? No, the proposed home will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. The setbacks will mimic the front yard setbacks of the existing home. Staff recommends approval based on the following findings. With the exception of the variance requested, the proposal will meet all the required standards and ordinances for the R1 district. The proposal would meet the required standards for a variance in that the proposed use of the property is reasonable. It is consistent with the existing conditions and matches the non-conforming setback of the existing home. The imposed setbacks will limit design opportunity, and the intent of the ordinance is to provide adequate spacing from the street, which it would match the setback of the existing home that's been located there since 1952. Approval of the variance is subject to the following conditions. The survey date stamp May 22nd, 2012, and the building plans and elevations date stamp May 31st, 2012. With that, I will stop and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chris. Any questions for Ms. Acker? Seeing none, I'm going to ask if the applicant is here and would like to come up and make some comments. Welcome. Just come up to one of the side microphones and then state your name and address. And
I'm Chad Donne, my wife Kate. We're proposing the house at 6617 Parkwood Road.
welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Hamid Kushani. I'm with Habitat Architecture. I'm the architect of the project and had helped them with through the process of design.
Anything you want to add to the staff report?
The only thing, I think Chris did a fantastic job of explaining exactly the hardship that we had to face as the setbacks dictated by the two adjacent houses require us to comply. We remained with a very small amount of space to work with at the very far end corner of the lot, so it became almost impractical to do so. So I really appreciate the work of the staff and their due diligence.
Any questions for the applicants? I just note for the record, we got an email from the neighbors on either side, both of which were supporting your application, one of which noted that without the variance, your new house would be moved closer to his house, and it wasn't what he was looking for. So, further comments or questions from the commission? Anything else you want to add? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So having heard from the staff and the applicants, I'd ask if there are any members of the public who would like to come up at this time and comment on this application. Going once, going twice. All right, seeing no interest in public comment, I'd seek a motion to close the public comment. A second? Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? So the public hearing is closed, and we'll bring the discussion back up to the commission. I'd ask for comments and discussion. Commissioner Forrest.
To me, it's not the predating setbacks of the other two homes that seems like the hardship to me. It's more simply the fact that it's a corner lot, so they're subject to two sides of their lot are then subject to these front yard setback limitations. So because any other situation we came upon, you're going to be bouncing around between existing setbacks anyway. But other than that, it seems like a practical solution to this situation. Otherwise, they do have a reasonable use without the variance, but considering the two sides of their lot are subject to setback, it seems reasonable.
Thank you. Other comments? Quiet crowd this evening. I'd entertain a motion if there's no further discussion. Go for it. Commissioner Carpenter.
Yes, I'd go ahead and make a motion to approve the application based on the findings and conditions contained in the staff report, and I'm comfortable incorporating Commissioner Forrest's comments as well. I think there can be multiple practical difficulties, and we may well have two here.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion has been made and seconded to approve the application. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Same sign. The application is granted. Good luck. Next is a 9.3-foot front street setback variance of 5101 Arcadia Avenue for Ken and Brett Johnson, the Eden Avenue Grill. Carrie, are you going to introduce this one?
I am.
Thank you.
Chair, members of the commission. I believe most of you are familiar with the site, the Eden Avenue Grill, located up in the Grandview District, south of Vernon, just east of Highway 100, or east of the Public Works site west of Highway 100. What the applicant is proposing is to construct an addition off the south side of the building that would cover the existing patio located in this area right here. This is a look at that patio area as it exists today. And what they're proposing is a hardy board with aluminum frame and a lot of windows, the addition here. And the unique part of this structure is that it will have a retractable roof. The top picture is with the roof closed, and then the various stages as you move on down. So in the summertime, they can still enjoy the patio on the south side of the building. The main concern that staff had when this application came in, it was in regard to parking. Our current ordinance doesn't require parking spaces for outdoor patios. But if it turns into year-round space, we need to accommodate the parking. So we took an examination of the property. This is a floor plan. They are proposing 26 spaces that would exist within the addition area located right here. Including the 26 spaces, the existing restaurant, there's a total of a capacity for 117 seats within the restaurant. And the number of employees on a maximum shift is 9. So based on that, they need 48 parking stalls. And the site plan demonstrates that they have 49 out there today. So they meet the parking requirement. So with that, we were just able to proceed on to just concentrating on the variance. Again, here's the addition on the south side of the building. The building would have a 25.7-foot setback. The required setback in this location is 35 feet, so they're requesting the 9.3 foot variance. So when considering the three variance criteria that are standard with all of our reviews, staff believes that the proposal is reasonable. It encloses an area that's existing hard space now, so there's no additional hard surface on the site. The addition would face that entrance or exit off of Highway 100 and Vernon, located here. To the south, over 150 feet away, is the office building. So there's quite a good separation between uses here to the south. Also, the practical difficulty in this instance is the location of the existing restaurant. If they were to put an addition anywhere else, they would either need a variance or it would reduce some of the parking. If we put an addition that would meet the required setback to the north in this location here, parking spaces would be lost. Same for if it were located on the east side of the building here, we'd lose parking spaces. If an addition were constructed off the front, that would also require a variance. Then when you look at the floor plan, additions off of the east side of the building here or here wouldn't function for the restaurant that's adjacent to the kitchen area. So this is really the ideal spot for this. Again, it's the existing patio. Staff doesn't believe that it would alter the character of the neighborhood. There's already activity within that space, and that the circumstances are unique to this property, given its location adjacent to the off-ramp there. So with that, staff is recommending approval of the variance subject to the findings and conditions that are outlined in the staff report. I could stand for any questions.
Thanks, Kerry. Any questions for Planner Teague? Commissioner Scheer.
Kerry, I want to establish, you said this, but I want to reestablish very clearly, the space that we're enclosing is space that has been their patio and has been used for dining, at least in the summer months or when weather would allow.
That is correct.
And this particular type of addition with this retractable roof, I assume it's not a year-round, it's just going to extend the seasonal use a little bit longer?
Yeah, they do plan to utilize that space in the wintertime.
Really?
They do.
Interesting. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Commissioner Platter.
Carrie, do you know if there's any building code issues with this? You know, you're creating another structure there, essentially.
They'll be required as part of their building permit to meet all of the minimum building code requirements, so that review would come, should the variance be approved in the application for the building permit.
Other comments or questions? Commissioner Scherer?
I don't know that this affects my vote on the variance, but I would sort of state for the record, this is one of my favorite restaurants, and it is, the parking is almost always inadequate. It is a favorite of many people in this town. As I buzzed by this evening, there were many cars out on the street. I think the reason it's not going to affect my vote is that I know that for as many months out of the year as they can, they use that patio anyway, so I don't think this is going to be a net huge addition to what may already be a slight parking problem on the site.
Yeah, staff shares those concerns. That was why we needed to take a close look at it, just to make sure that the parking would, that the city code would be satisfied, right?
Other comments? I have a question, Carrie, just in terms of the setback. It's a 35-foot setback, and is that to the property line or the road right-of-way, or are they one and the same, or how does that work?
They're one and the same.
And is that particular to this zone, and is it a side yard setback, is it a front yard setback? How do we describe that?
Yeah, it's essentially a street setback, whether it's front, side street, rear. It's a 35-foot setback on any piece of this property that abuts a right-of-way.
So one of the things that comes to mind for me, having spent much of the last 2 years working on this area, is just one of the things we've talked about in the Grandview framework that the City Council has adopted is the potential conversion of this exit ramp to basically a street that would, on the exit ramp would kind of turn into a frontage road on the east side of this lot, and then there would be a street that would feed into Arcadia, where the current exit ramp is now. And this may be a question more for the applicant. Yeah, that's a good picture of it there. Just as to how this would work in the, I assume that you're doing this for the long term, and I'd just be interested in some thoughts about how this is going to fit in if there's a street there that is kind of a feeder street, if you will, from the frontage road. Any other comments or questions from the Commission? Commissioner Carpenter.
Curious, quick question. With respect to the current ownership of the Edina Grill, is that the, that's not the Edina Grill, I'm sorry. But is that the same ownership that existed at the time that property was originally developed as a restaurant?
That I'm not sure. We'd have to check with the applicant on that.
The reason I'm wondering about that is whether there's sort of a self-created issue here at all. If the original owner had developed it and designed it this way.
I think that Mr. Johnson can probably, when he gets up, answer that question for you. I know I've had conversations in the past with him where he knows a lot of the history of the area, so I suspect he can share that with you. Commissioner Fisher?
Carrie, could you go to the slide that shows the view from the, that one right there. So there's quite a bit of, I'm trying to get a gauge for the grade change to, as Commissioner Staunton is speaking to this potential future street that would be going along there, what would you say is the elevation change from this patio down to where that street would be?
I would guess it to be from the roadway down here up to the top between 10 and 15 feet.
Oh, my.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions from the Commission? Hearing none, I'll ask the applicants to step forward and share whatever they'd like with respect to the application. Just come on up and state your name and address. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Brett Johnson. This is my dad, Ken Johnson. And this gentleman is Kent Forsland. He is the mastermind behind the project. Mr. Teague did a fantastic job of presenting it. I think it would be probably most beneficial for me to maybe answer a quick couple of the questions that were brought up.
Sure.
And then if you have any other questions about the actual structure itself, Kent can help you out with that, of course. I guess the first issue is the parking, which is obviously a concern of ours. We did the math, and we were, we were under code. One of our main problems that we fight is that everyone meets these days, and that's something that I wish I could avoid. We are fortunate to have a few spots on the street there of Arcadia that work in our benefit, but that's something that we wish we could implement some type of carpooling in that area. But it's something that we struggle with, but we're working around that issue. As far as the Four Season, I forget who asked that question. Sorry.
The history, you mean? The
Someone
Four
was
Season,
one-
right?
Four
Commissioner
Season,
Scherer.
yeah.
Right.
So it actually is a four-season operation. There will be infrared heating installed with a little fireplace off to the side, which will enable it to be operating throughout all 4 seasons of the year, which will be fantastic. I guess unless anyone has any other questions, I think, go ahead.
Yeah, I purchased that back in 1978, and it was the pantry restaurant for like, I think it was 19 years. And then when we got a liquor license, we changed the name to Eden Avenue Grill. And that's what we have seen here now since, I think, 95. I think we've been Eden Avenue. But basically, same menu, just kind of grown up a little bit, so. Patio, I think, early 80s, if I recall. I think I put that in. That wasn't there when it was not in the original Golden Bear plans, but it seemed like a logical spot at the time, and I think it was several years after it was the pantry we introduced the patio. Yeah.
So, Mr. Johnson, you know when the structure was built, the original structure?
Late 60s. I don't know the exact year, but
So we said it was the Golden Bear and then the pantry?
originally Golden Bear, then a couple of years, then it was Kebabs a couple of years, then it was Albert's Ice Cream Parlor for a couple of years, and then I bought it in 1978. So.
Okay. Other questions or comments for the applicants?
We do have some actual materials with us if anyone wants to take a look at
I think that would be helpful. Yeah.
materials of the actual structure itself,
Okay.
if anyone.
Yeah, and you may be able to use it right there. That may be the easiest way for everybody to see it. Oh, Jordan, can you back off of that, or Scott? Great, thank you.
So this is.
We may need a microphone for you there. Great.
This is a representation of the board and batten look that's currently on the restaurant. Basically, a relatively flat surface with boards applied, and we would be planning on using a cement board type product. We're showing some of the colors here of the. Is this upside down for you? Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, here we go. Showing some of the color scheme here in the glass and some of the profiles, and then the twin wall that would be up in the roof material.
I think we had mentioned earlier that the roof does have 3 panels that retract. The sliding glass on the windows also retract as well.
So,
Structure, so it opens up.
so it slides. You know, I noticed from one of the pictures. Does it slide kind of from right to left underneath each other?
If you're looking north on the building,
Yeah.
there'll be 3 panels coming off the roof essentially.
Right.
So closest looking north, starting on the west side, it'll move. That farthest west panel will go on top of that panel, and then that panel it'll work its way east, if that makes sense.
Actually,
The other way
it'll
around.
work its way west.
Did I?
That's
I
okay.
apologize. Yes. I'm thinking of it backwards here.
Okay, so that there'd be one at the end. They don't go back.
Exactly.
They don't go north. They go
On
west.
top of each other.
They go west, yes.
And then it looks to me like there are a couple of doorways, one on the east and one on the south, is that right? There's sliding glass doors on the south and then a stairway door on the east?
Yep. Yep, so that will be an emergency.
So those are just intended as service or emergency exit?
Correct. One of them is already existing, and then one would be added to enclose the structure as an emergency exit.
Which one already exists?
The door heading out to the patio, which would be, I'm all messed up, which would be it'd be further west.
Okay. Where the sliding glass doors are in the depiction?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Other questions or comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
Any members of the public who would like to comment on this application? This is a time to open the public hearing and hear from anybody who's interested in making a comment. Saving it up for the next applications. All right, seeing no public comments, I'd take a motion from the commission to close the public hearing. In a second. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? So the public hearing is closed, and let's bring the discussion up to the commission. Comments or questions? Discussion. Commissioner Carpenter.
Just, I guess the elephant in the room for me a little bit is the issue of self-creation. We have a situation where the restaurant predates the original ownership, or goes back to, predates the original ownership, but with the patio essentially having been installed by the current owner, it raises an issue, and I would welcome being disabused of this, but it kind of raises an issue of self-creation that makes me wonder if that makes a variance problematic here.
Commissioner Forrest.
I concur with Commissioner Carpenter. I was troubled by the same thing. I want to be convinced otherwise, because basically they need a variance because they want to do this. But on the other hand, and my second concern is the parking. I'm afraid to go to the back of the lot because it's hard to turn around. But I really like the fact that because it's not the kind of restaurant that's limited to, 2 or 4 people coming at a time, but people do meet up there. It is a community gathering space, and I think that's healthy as well. So I'm working my head around the other side of it, though.
I guess just in response to those two comments, my reaction is that the structure has been there, even though the patio has not. The structure's been there for quite some time, and even if the patio didn't exist now, the same issues that Carrie identified would be here. If you're going to add to this structure, do you do it on the north side or do you do it on the west side? There really aren't viable options there. And the east side, it takes away parking space. This is really the only option for adding on to it. So I see the pre-existing siting of the building prior to this ownership as kind of dealing with the problem that you're raising. Commissioner Schroeder.
I want to respond to, I don't know if respond to, but Commissioner Carpenter brings this up often, the issue of self-creation.
And I think he's our creationist.
Right. So we could make the same argument in the previous case, that we didn't need to grant an application to the previous case because there was a house there and they could just live there. They wanted to tear it down and build a new one because they wanted to do it. It's the same thing here. If they want to do this, it's essentially the same thing. I don't understand the self-created issue separating or creating a different precedent from the one we just approved.
Commissioner Forrest.
I guess I would distinguish it in that it's a self-created situation, but the difficulty I don't see as self-created. I see that as geography. So I can justify it in that way, that the practical difficulty itself is not something that they created themselves. Sure, they installed the patio, but basically the geography is what it is, and it's not changing the footprint or the parking issue in any way. So I'm more comfortable with it because of that.
Commissioner Rock?
Unless I misunderstand what's currently there, I don't think that this changes the parking, right? Because if they're currently using the patio, and there's currently parking, this is only going to make the parking problem extend further into the year, but it's not going to increase the problem, right?
I think that's accurate, yeah. Mr. Teague?
I might add, I didn't include in the staff report, but another practical difficulty here is the fact that they need a street setback on 3 out of the 4 sides. So they need a 35-foot setback on 3 sides.
Makes for a smaller buildable area. Other comments or questions? Commissioner Fisher?
I would just, to me, if you're sort of waffling about is it a legitimate variance request or not, I happen to think it is, but to me, I look at, what's the impact on neighboring properties, and in this location, it's virtually zero. And there may be actually positive impact. And if you think about, again, maybe we're not allowed to look into the future, but some of us have been so invested in this Grandview planning. I think the evolution of this building is going to start, it might have 2 sides in a sense, and this is actually a nice step forward in that regard. I just think, the most impacted property is what we'd call the building on stilts, correct? To the
right,
south. And there's just really no negative impact that I can see, so.
Any further comments, discussion, motions? I'd happily entertain a motion.
I move approval of the variance request, subject to the staff's findings and requirements, as well as I would like to add in Planner Teague's comments that the lot does have street setbacks on 3 sides, because that's nice and clear that it's an issue of where they could do what. And I like that.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Carrie, you can add that into the findings, assuming this gets passed. Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
The motion passes. Congratulations, and go forward and construct. Next up is a conditional use permit to construct a new home 1 foot above the first floor elevation of the existing home at 5537 Park Place for Kate Schmidt. And I think it's agenda item 6C. Chris, are you going to introduce this one?
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission, this is a conditional use permit request for, for
the other one.
Park Place. We have 2 of them this evening, which is a little rare because we've only processed 1 prior to the 2 that are on the agenda this evening. This is a conditional use permit request for 5537 Park Place to allow the first floor elevation to be 3.75 feet higher than the previous home and 2.75 feet higher than allowed by ordinance due to groundwater at an elevation of 855.29 feet. The subject property is a corner lot. As highlighted, it is on the east side of Park Place, and it is just north of West 56th Street. This is an aerial photograph of the area prior to when the home was torn down. If you drove by there recently, there is no home there. This is what the home used to look like. It had a tuck-under garage. First floor elevation actually is right here, and then with another level up above the garage. This is a survey of the property when the home was on the property. What you'll notice is that you have a grade elevation around the first floor elevation of 864. This is the proposed building footprint. The house meets all of the required setbacks. It's 9 feet 4 inches away from the north lot line. The actual minimum setback is a little over 5 feet, but due to the height, they do have to add additional setback. The house will be in line, or actually a little bit further back than the house to the north, which is the required front yard setback. There's a 25-foot rear yard setback, which is right up to where the steps are. The back of the house actually is a little bit further away from the required rear yard setback, and then you can see the side street setback. The corner of the garage will be right at the minimum setback. The property owner, Kate Schmidt, is requesting a conditional use permit to construct a new home. The conditional use permit is being requested to allow the first floor elevation of the new home to exceed the first floor elevation of the previous home by more than 1 foot. The current ordinance allows you to elevate the new home by 1 foot, but no more than 1 foot. Specifically, the applicant would like to raise the first floor 3.75 feet above the first floor elevation. The previous home was at 865. The new first floor is proposed to be at 869.05. The maximum allowed increase without the conditional use permit would allow a maximum elevation of 866.3. The new first floor is proposed to be 2.75 feet over the 1 foot allowed by city code in order to reasonably protect the lower level of the new dwelling from groundwater intrusion. There was a report of geotechnical exploration in a letter dated May 1st, 2012 from ITCO Allied Engineering Company that was included in your packets regarding groundwater levels, indicating that groundwater is at a level of 855.29 with a recommendation by the engineers of a lowest floor elevation of 859.29. The old basement was at 858. I'll have you note that the property had previously been in the flood zone. The property owner did apply for removal of the flood zone, which they were successful in so doing. Prior to that, the flood elevation for that area is actually 862.5. They would have been required to increase their basement elevation by 2 feet above that. So their lowest floor, if they wouldn't have been pulled out of the flood zone, would have been at 864.5. which is just 1 foot lower than the old first floor of the house, so of the existing, or the home that was torn down. So without that, they would have literally had to push that house up, the lowest floor, the basement, just 1 foot below the old first floor. This is a more detailed version of their first floor. They'll have the garage loading off of Park Place. The front of the house will actually face south with the front door facing south, and then the rear yard actually towards the east. This is the second floor plan of the home, the basement floor plan. This is the south elevation of the home, which would be considered the front of the house with the front door facing south. It would have the tallest roof peak facing south at 30 feet. The maximum height actually would be 35 feet, but they've elected to bring the tallest peak down to 30 feet. This would be the Park Place elevation, or their westerly elevation with the garage loading off of Park Place. They have a lower peaked roof on this side. It's closer to 26 feet. This is the north elevation of the house. You can see that the peak height is 26 feet facing east, with a 30-foot peak height here that would be facing south and north. This is the east side elevation that would be facing the home that's adjacent on Woodcrest. Neighborhood context, this is the lot as you see it today. It's a vacant lot. House across the street on Park Place, house to the north. This is the house directly to the north at 5533 Park Place. It's a story and a half. The house to the south at 5528 Woodcrest is sort of a rambler. There's living space above the garage. This house, I understand, does not have a basement. That's not uncommon throughout this neighborhood because the flood zone kind of goes in and out from lot to lot, and there were some homes that were built without basements. This is the house across the street on Park Place, one door up. This is the one directly across the street on Park Place at 5536. There's a variety of housing styles, roof lines, grade changes throughout the neighborhood. This is at 5600 Park Place. This is across the street at 5601 Park Place. This is a two-story home that is kitty corner across on Woodcrest. Regarding the conditional use permit, the general requirements for a conditional use permit indicate that the property shouldn't have an undue adverse impact on government facilities, utilities, and services, will not generate traffic, will not go over the capacity of the street serving the property, does not have an undue adverse impact on public health, safety, or welfare, will not impede the normal or orderly development improvement of other property in the vicinity, and that it conforms to the applicable restrictions and special conditions of the district in which it is located, and is consistent with the comprehensive plan. This property will be developed with a single-family home, which would have no impact on any of those conditions for the general conditional use permit requirements. Now, there are additional requirements that are indicated in our zoning ordinance regarding allowing a property to go up 1 foot above what the existing first floor elevation is or was of that existing home. The property must meet one or more of the first three conditions and always meet the fourth condition. The first three conditions include that the first floor elevation may be increased to the extent necessary to elevate the lowest level of the dwelling to an elevation 2 feet above the 100-year flood elevation, that the first floor elevation may be increased to the extent necessary to reasonably protect the dwelling from groundwater intrusion, that the first floor elevation may be increased to the extent necessary to allow the new building to meet state building code, and then all conditional uses requested for this must meet that the increased floor elevation will only be permitted if the new structure or addition fits the character of the neighborhood in height, mass, and scale. Conditions 2 and 4 apply to the proposed new home. The proposed new home will have a low floor elevation of 859.3. The applicant would like the home to have 8 3/4 foot ceiling height in the basement. An 8 to 9 foot basement ceiling height within single-family homes in Edina is typical. The combination of the inability to go down lower to accomplish the ceiling height in the basement and the desire to raise the low floor elevation and upgrade the building materials from previous building practices will result in the new home being 3.75 feet above the first floor elevation of the existing home. The proposed new home would fit the character of the neighborhood as demonstrated by the photos that were indicated earlier. The two-story home with an attached 3-car garage should blend well with the neighborhood. Primary issue and staff recommendations is the proposed new home with a first floor elevation 3.75 feet higher than the existing home reasonable for the site. Staff believes the proposal is reasonable. The proposal meets the conditional use permit's findings for basic conditional use permit. It does meet the proposed minimum zoning ordinance requirements for height, coverage, and setback. Because of groundwater issues, the basement of the new home must be elevated to a minimum recommended height of 859.3. The new first floor height will be at 869.05, the basement providing 8 3/4 foot ceiling heights, which is considered reasonable for the city. The proposed new home is in character with the neighborhood. The home is similar to other two-story homes constructed within the general neighborhood. Staff recommends that the Council and Planning Commission approve the conditional use permit for a new home at 5537 Park Place. The conditional use permit allows the new home to have a first floor elevation of 869.05 feet, which is 3.75 feet higher than the first floor elevation of the existing home, and 2.75 feet above the first floor height allowed by code. Approval should be based on the following findings: that the proposal meets the conditional use permit conditions of the zoning ordinance. It meets all applicable zoning ordinance requirements. The proposed new home is in character with the neighborhood. Approval should be subject to the following conditions: that the site must be developed and maintained in conformance with the following plans: the survey date stamped August 19th, 2011, and that building plans and elevations date stamped May 23rd, 2012, that submit a copy of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District permit to the city. The city may require some revisions based upon the plans meeting the district requirements, and that the final grading and drainage plans are subject to review and approval by the city engineer prior to issuance of the building permit. With that, I will stop and answer any questions you may have.
Before I ask for questions and comments from the Commission, Chris, just as a distinction, and for those who are here, correct me if I'm wrong, but as a conditional use permit, we are going to be making a recommendation to the City Council, and the City Council is the body that votes on whether to grant the conditional use permit or not. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Whereas with the variances, the Commission acts as the Board of Review, and when we approve a variance absent an appeal to the City Council, that variance is approved. So,
That's correct.
so for those who are here, just understand that we are studying this in order to make a recommendation. We'll make recommended findings and conclusions to the City Council, but they will take it up at a future meeting. So with that, I'd ask for questions or comments from the Commission. Commissioner Fisher.
We should probably make another clarifying point and make sure the attorneys somewhere can verify this for me. But with a variance, we're let me see if I can get this straight. With a variance, we're saying we have to have findings of hardship to say that we're going to vary from the existing condition or rule. With a conditional use, if they meet the conditions, so our discussion is more based on do they meet the conditions that would then allow them to move forward with this, which is a slightly different discussion, particularly given what we were talking about with. But I think that is a clarification that should be made. So there are conditions in place, and it says if you meet, you have to meet one of these, and certainly this one, and so that's a different part of our conversation.
So there's kind of three levels. There's permitted uses under the code that you have to get a building permit, et cetera, but you don't need to get any special approval from the Commission or from the Council. And then there are conditional uses where you have to satisfy certain conditions that are in the code in order to receive approval. And then variances are requests that are asking to depart from the requirements of the ordinance. So any questions or comments other than that from the Commission? Commissioner Schroeder.
Chris, I have a question about Condition 4. An increase in the first floor elevation will only be permitted if the new structure addition fits the character of the neighborhood in height, mass, and scale. How does our ordinance define mass? Sorry.
It doesn't. I mean, specifically, if you go to the definition of section of the ordinance, it does not.
Thank you.
Let me just also ask Chris if you can, this is something, this particular ordinance, this conditional use permit ordinance, is something that we spent a lot of time working on in conjunction with, I can think of one particular application that came in front of us, and we were trying to figure out what's the right approach to these things. Can you give us kind of a summary of how we got here and what the rationale is? I mean, I'm really looking for the purpose behind the conditional use permit ordinance that we have in this situation.
I believe at the time, we weren't processing variances because the Minnesota Supreme Court was considering a variance appeal by the city of Minnetonka, so no municipalities were processing variances, and this would have been, prior to that, a variance situation. The Planning Commission discussed approaching it through the conditional use permit process, which actually condenses down the criteria requirements to allow somebody to go higher than 1 foot. It was discussed, it was decided that the 4 criteria, at least the 3 first criteria that one would have to be met of each of the 3, is very limited. You either have to have a flood zone issue, you have to be in the flood zone, or you have to have a water or drainage issue, or for some reason you can't meet the state building code. It's very limited in the scope, and yes, you did spend a lot of time discussing how, if somebody comes forward with a request, how you could focus it on certain areas that would be much different than going through the variance process, which would be a practical difficulty. These are very specific criteria.
And if I can go back even a step further, the requirement that you not elevate the finished first floor more than 1 foot above the existing finished first floor was really an attempt to try to prevent houses from being built way up,
yes,
where they could technically meet the height requirement because the distance between where the building emerged from the ground and the peak of the roof or the midpoint of the roof would satisfy the code, but the house would feel a lot taller, similar
yes,
to what this gentleman had talked about earlier. And
yes,
so we were trying to figure out a way to prevent that lifting up of buildings.
yes,
And then we had an applicant come in and say, well, wait a minute, I'm on a floodplain, and if I don't lift up, now I can't build anything taller than, she, I think, was saying she was going to have 6-foot
Well,
basements or
the
something.
basement wouldn't meet, the ceiling heights wouldn't meet
Right.
code, and it would be in conflict with another ordinance, our floodplain ordinance. You have to elevate 2 feet above the floodplain in order to be in conformance with the floodplain ordinance. So you have one code that's limiting or capping where you can put that first floor, and another code that's requiring you to lift up that
Right.
basement. You're then eliminating a basement, and our code requires a basement.
So I go through this, and it's a bit of a roundabout, but I think it's important because this application and the next application both deal with this ordinance that's trying to accomplish the purpose of not having these houses go up too high and have the impact that they might have on their neighbors that's undesirable, but at the same time accommodate these water table issues that come up from time to time. So with that, any further questions or discussion before we ask for the applicant? Thanks, Chris. So if the applicant could come up and tell us your story. Just one of the side microphones would be good, and just your name and address, please.
I'm Scott Buston with Great Neighborhood Homes, 4615 Wooddale.
My name is Kate Schmidt. I am the property owner at 5537 Park Place. My husband cannot be here, but he's also applying with us for our family.
Welcome. Mr. Buston, you want to give us an overview of how we got here?
Sure. The property at 5537 Park Place, if you're familiar with it, the house has really been in disrepair for many years, as long as I can remember. It was purchased by another builder a couple years ago. He worked on doing the FEMA application to raise the grade up, tore the house down, and it's been there vacant now for about a year and a half. And then he sold it to our client, who then is undertaking the effort to build the new house on the elevated, now out of the floodplain lot. So we're basically just continuing the work that was done, A, to get out of the floodplain. Now we're trying to get it out of the groundwater, the higher groundwater table. So it's, Colonial Grove neighborhood is a very eclectic neighborhood, and it's a neighborhood in transition. I mean, if you all drive through, you'll notice a lot of new homes getting built. There's still a lot of the Bloomberg Ramblers that were built in 40s and 50s there. A lot of them in this lower area don't have basements, and it was, I believe, obviously because of the near the creek and the high water table. We built many homes in the area there. They're in much higher elevation, several blocks away, and those sump pumps run all the time, even at those higher elevations. I mean, it is an area that is lower than the surrounding area, and due also to the soil types, there's definitely water table issues that people deal with. And this property being one of the lowest points, if you went there again, you notice the homes coming from the west, pretty much cascade down to this property. And I was even by there today, and it's still got big water, standing water left over from the rains we had a while back, where the surrounding properties are pretty much drained. So it is a property that does accumulate the water from the surrounding properties there. And obviously we'd prefer not to have go above the 1 foot ordinance. If you know the homes we build in the area, we really try to build homes that blend in. If you drove by 5420 Park Place, that house just looks like every other house right next door. However, we also don't want to build the Schmitz a boat that they have to bail out all the time. So it's really not a smart idea for us to build at the 1 foot level, because it would require us to push the basement below the point that the engineers are recommending for keeping the water out of the house. So, but I want to applaud the Schmitz for really, from the get-go, they asked me and they worked hard to let's build this house, so we want it to fit into the neighborhood. So what can we do, even though we do have to lift it up to make the mass stay down? So they kept well below that 35-foot ridge height, and we're continuing to look for ideas as far as how to bring the front eave down and use materials to give it the low facade in the front. So I want to applaud them for doing that. That's been their wish from the get-go. The one home that's the lowest adjacent to us would be the home to the east that we're seeing showing a picture, and it is a Bloomberg Rambler there. And if you look at the one elevation, we designed that side of the house to have the eave coming way down just to the first floor, and then having a little dormer there in the roof line. So you're definitely looking up there, seeing that roof come down to the eave versus seeing a high sidewall. So we really tried to respect the lowest neighbor by designing the house that way. And I think, the home that they've come up with is a beautiful home. We use a lot of quality materials, stone, shingles, shingle siding that you would find in the area. So based on the feedback that we've got we had a neighbor meeting a couple weeks ago. A lot of neighbors, about 10 neighbors show up and give us real positive feedback. I just got another email today from the homeowner at 5609 Woodcrest, voicemail from the homeowner at 5600 Woodcrest. We've got some favorable feedback. We really tried to communicate as much as we could above and beyond what's required of the city. Sends out the notice regarding the meeting to the neighborhood. We put up a conditional use permit sign. We sent the plans out to neighbors within a block radius with a letter explaining what this meeting was about and showing the plans. If they had any questions, to give us a call. So really tried to make it as full disclosure as we could and give people opportunity for feedback. But I do understand, when you're in an area where you've got some homes that are 30, 35 feet, and then you've got some ramblers, you're going to have different opinions from homeowners as far as what type of house should be built on the site. And we really tried to build a home that fits within the envelope of the eclectic character and scale of homes in Colonial Grove.
So just so I'm clear, the house is no longer on the FEMA map, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, so that portion of our kind of consideration doesn't qualify. There's not a FEMA minimum or maximum height. Okay. And so, as I understand from the packet, you have retained an engineer to do some studies of where the water table lies, and that's kind of what has driven the height that you're starting at for the slab at the bottom of the basement.
Yes.
Just one question for me. I'm sure others may have some, and this gets a little confusing as we throw all the numbers around, but from the report, it looks like they're saying that the lowest basement slab should be at 859.29. Is that right? And so but then you're saying the new first floor would be proposed at 869.05. Yeah, we're talking about an 8.75 foot basement. So where's the extra couple of feet? Can you just, what's that? Really? So the 10 or the 11 feet is what you need in order to have 8.75 feet of clearance in the basement? Is that the?
Yeah, you have a floor truss.
Okay. Obviously, lots of structural engineers at the table. Other than me.
Yeah, we build, when we're trying to scale the existing neighborhood, we use trusses that are top cord bearing versus stacking them on top of the wall. So we're trying to get a little floor truss on top of the foundation wall, but you are going to end up with, you've got some truss in there, floor system, finished flooring to get up to that finish. Really, the first floor elevation is a finished first floor.
So you start at 859.3,
yep,
more or less, and then you're going to have 8.75 feet of space, and then you've got to have whatever you need to hold up the first floor before you get to the top finished flooring of the first floor. Okay. Other stupid questions from the commission? Commissioner Schroeder.
I'd like to ask Mr. Busson the same question I asked Chris, is what's the definition of mass? You've done a nice job identifying what the height of structures surrounding, but what about mass?
Well, again, I don't think I think you'll get a different opinion if you talk to anybody what mass is. I think mass, in my opinion, is at the end of the day when the house is finished, how does it tie into the neighborhood? And I think it's a combination of, when we talk to neighbors, it's how high is that ridge? They always ask how high it is. That's the first question. And then also how you design the home so that it reflects the roof lines of the neighborhood. So if you can, that's not up anymore, but if we can make more of a 1.5-story type look, we've got an eave line coming down to the first floor versus doing like a 2-story, say like a colonial wall that goes up, 20-some feet, and then the roof starts. I think that's a bigger looking mass than where we've got it coming down. Mass is a combination of ridge height, but also streetscape and how the eave line presents itself compared to the adjacent homes.
Commissioner Platter.
I just have a question. So if, for example, you built at 866, I believe the ordinance is 35 feet height, right, Carrie, for the building height?
To the ridge line, correct.
To the ridge line. So if I'm doing this correctly, actually what you're doing now, even though you're raising the building site 3.75 feet, you're actually a foot or two below that of what you could have built.
Correct.
Correct, in theory? Okay.
It's also, the second story is designed to have the second story built somewhat into the roof system. Rather than stack the roof on the second story, the roof comes into the second story space and creates kind of the knee walls you'd see on older homes on second stories.
So you're actually less than allowed, notwithstanding the raising the finished floor?
Correct. We're sort of going up, and then we're sort of squashing it
Okay.
from the top.
So I can understand. Okay, thank you.
Other comments from the commission? Thank you.
Thank you for all the attention, and thank you for the report, Chris.
Appreciate it. Comments from the public. This is the public hearing portion of the application, and we're happy to hear from anybody who has an interest or an opinion to express. So come on up if you're interested in sharing. Not everybody at once. State your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, I'm Brian Bellinger from 5533 Oak Lawn.
Welcome, Mr. Bellinger.
Thank you. My reason for being here tonight was concern about what the finished roof height would end up at. So I was very happy to hear that the owner and the builder are taking that concern to heart and are actually building below where they would be allowed to otherwise. I'm glad to hear the commission worried about this. I'm surprised that mass has not been defined. That concerns me. I would think that would just be the volume of the structure, but obviously there's a lot of opinions out there. I don't know how we can have a regulation that's not defined, but anyway. So I liked what I saw in the drawings. It was kind of hard to judge, but judging by the size of the windows, it looks like it's going to be it's not going to be a McMansion. It's going to be a nicely proportioned house, and I'm fine with people tearing down smaller houses and building bigger houses as long as they don't do so to the detriment of their neighbor. And I'm not an immediate neighbor. I'm a couple blocks away. So my final thought would just be that I would not want to see a blanket approval of this kind of thing everywhere in the city or in the neighborhood. I think that the particulars of this lot with the floodplain and the water issues and all that are really what helped to sell this, and I would not want to see this 1 foot deviation routinely ignored in the future without some special real need like this. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And in fact, you echo a lot of the discussion that we had when we were wrestling with how to deal with these kind of one-offs, especially with the water table and the floodplain. Any further comment from the public? Hearing none, I would take a motion to close the public hearing. Second. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? And the public hearing is closed, and I'll ask for comments and discussion from the Commission. Commissioner Fisher.
On the comment the gentleman made about, blanket approvals of this type of thing, this is actually the second time that this has been before us. The first one being the bellwether case that, what did it go, 6 months? It was brutal because it was right in the middle of when we couldn't really grant variances, and this really was a predicament for the homeowners. So we had to create a reasonable conditional use situation that we felt needed to be to allow the kind of scrutiny we really needed to have as a commission and as a council, so we didn't just get this thing, we didn't want blanket approvals of this sort of thing. So it's, what was that, about 2 years ago? So it's just fascinating to me that we haven't had any of these, and tonight we have two. So it would give the impression that these things are just rolling through, when in fact, we're getting about one a year, I guess. They just happen to be on the same night. So just for a little history there, I think it is one thing, just a note from the gentleman that spoke earlier, one thing we have to bring up or find out about, and the trick in all of these things is you're trying to create parameters, and it comes back to the mass issue as well. We use words. Height is an easier one because we can all measure that. Mass, we've had many discussions in the past about how do you really effectively measure mass. We can measure it, of course, mathematically, but the impact of it is different. So we talked about how do you take photos from the street, and in the end, we have to be able to actually police it or go out, and staff has to be able to deal with it. So that's where it gets a little tricky. I think the key here on mass is, what is that maximum height, and how much of the building is trying to reach out to that outer envelope. And I think in this particular case, the attempt with the design is to make sure that even at the highest point, which is 5 feet below what it in theory could be, it's very minimal amount of building at that point and quickly dropping off. And again, that gets a little tricky to mathematically correlate to and apply a rule. And what we don't want to do is apply a rule that's going to require then variances from everybody. So anyway, that becomes part of the challenge in all of this. But I do think that from a mass perspective, it seems like there's been a good attempt to manage that. I think the height is well done. My question, it's a little harder to tell, is in effect, so then the last question is that floor level, because that can have an impact at street level when you're going through a neighborhood. We all have seen those cases where all of a sudden you're like, well, that's odd. All of a sudden the grade isn't effectively changing that much, but the house just popped up out of nowhere. I don't think that will be an issue here, but that would be the one thing to kind of look at and try and figure out. Sometimes it's nice if you can do an elevation across showing the comparative floors on the houses on each side as well.
Going to that point too, Carrie, with respect to the comment that we had earlier in community comment, I noticed when I went out to the site and looked, there is kind of a vertical drop-off. I mean, the topography is descending from west to east as you head toward the creek, and so between this home and the 5528 Woodcrest home, there's kind of a drop-off there, almost a vertical drop-off. As we heard in the other example, do the city regulations allow basically a retaining wall in that situation, or does it gently slope down, or how do you deal with that?
We rely on engineering staff to review the grading permit. They ensure that the drainage doesn't, with the new retaining wall or grading or fill, whatever they bring in, can't make the existing situation any worse than it existed.
In terms of?
In terms of the amount of drainage that runs to the adjacent property.
Okay. They
can't increase that.
Other questions or comments from the Commission? Commissioner Forrest.
It appears like you're changing the orientation of the house. I'm sorry, you're seated back there now, to where the garage is now on the west side, which is the house address side. Is that correct? Yes. He said yes.
Mr. Busen, if you could just come up again.
I'm sorry.
Just so that anybody watching can hear your comments. Thanks.
Yes, it's correct. It's 5537 Park Place. The garage will face Park Place, whereas the old home had faced 56. Park Place is a quieter street. It's a better safety entrance. And plus, I think the home facing 56 will have a nicer look with the garage facing the side.
I agree with the way it will look from, I think it's oriented nicely to 56. My one concern for that would be, if we're talking about impact in the neighborhood and stuff, all of a sudden the house next door is a garage. So that's why I was asking about that, but I agree with you.
And if you drove down 56, there's other examples of that.
Okay. Thank you.
Other comments or questions? Commissioner Scherer.
I guess this is more a comment than a question. The condition that I struggle with in these, pardon my voice this evening, is the third, which states the first floor elevation may be increased to the extent necessary to allow the new building to meet state building code, City of Edina code, or other statutory requirements. The city code, as I read it, provides that you must have a basement, and the minimum height requirement is 7 feet. The question I end up having as I struggle with these is, what latitude are we required to give someone in a circumstance like this, where they're knowingly building in a floodplain? 9 feet is certainly more desired in all new construction that we see in the community. This proposal is for 8.75, I believe. Many homes in the city, though, are not that high, especially if they were built probably more than 20 years ago. And our need to grant that to every homeowner making a request is sort of a conundrum to me in these circumstances where we're asking for for the city to give something back, basically.
Carrie, on that point, can you educate us on what the code requirement is? Is there a minimum height requirement for a basement?
Commissioner Scheer is correct. It is 7 feet.
And is that state building code, or is that our code, or where does that come from?
I believe it's both.
Okay.
When looking at the 4 conditions, the way the code reads is that just one of the first 3 have to be met, and the 4th condition always needs to be met. So in this case, it's the condition number 2 where the first floor elevation has to be increased due to the water table issue.
But, you know, certainly number 2 also talks about to the extent necessary to reasonably protect the dwelling from groundwater intrusion. And I think Commissioner Scheer's point is well taken there. You know, how much is necessary to reasonably protect? And do you need a 7-foot ceiling or an 8-foot ceiling or a 9 or 12? Or
Yeah, is it an extra 1, an extra 2, an extra 3, an extra 4? And that certainly raises the first floor, given,
Right.
you know, to additional height. You know, that being said, I like the design of the home, and I you know, commend the owner and the builder in terms of, you know, their efforts to make this fit in and maintain the height below the overall maximum that they could have attained. But this is a bit of a conundrum for me, and if we're going to see more of these, that's going to be a hard question every time. How much do we need to grant in order to provide this? And it may occur many more times if that neighborhood is starting to be rebuilt. It was a swamp. Landfill went in there. When I was a child, I hunted toads there. So, you know, it's not surprising that there's a water problem there at all.
always a history lesson.
Chair
I'm old. I've lived here a long time.
I didn't say that. Let the record reflect. Commissioner Fisher.
I think that's a really excellent point. You know, to me, the easy part of validating on these is, you know, you can get the engineering reports or you can get the floodplain data that says the basement has to start here. So we have that. But even tonight, we have 2 different proposed basement ceiling heights, which, you know, is not surprising. We know the code says 7 feet is a minimum, but I don't think any of us want to see anyone with a 7-foot basement in a new construction. And part of the discussion we had, the very first and last conditional use permit that we dealt with this issue was what's necessary, what's required, and what just makes good sense from the perspective of home value and resale, and because what's good for the resale of that home is good for the city. You know, we don't want homes that nobody wants. And then matching that with, of course, the specific circumstance of what's happening around that house. Now, in the last one we did, I honestly, Carrie, I don't know, do you remember what the ceiling height we ended up allowing there on our very first one?
Yeah, we think 8.5.
8.5. So there you go, 8.5, 8.75, 9. You know, I don't know. I mean, all 3 of those are way higher than my ceiling in the basement, I can tell you that. But I think that is something we should probably just come to grips with, of what is a number that we feel is generally okay, unless there's an extraordinary circumstance. Because otherwise, I think, it's going to change every time.
Commissioner Scheer.
I would like for us as a group to have, just from a consistency standpoint, to have some sort of common application if we could. It seems a bit unfair that we so individually judge that height as we look at each home. And I don't think these will be the last two that will come before us in that neighborhood.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
But and I don't, the only variable would be what's the impact on the immediate homes on either side, that extra little bit.
I mean, for Commissioner Carpenter.
I would just go on to add one other thing, which is that my sense is that this is probably going to shake itself out over time a little bit, and we're not, in my judgment, not likely to see, substantial deviations from what we've probably already seen. Whatever substantial might be, we might differ on that. But, I think the solution that we came up originally is working reasonably well on the very limited opportunities we've had to test it. And I'm comfortable with the idea of letting it kind of percolate a little bit longer and see how it evolves a little bit.
Commissioner Forrest.
I think that was a good catch, though, on the part of Commissioner Scheer, that it says that since Condition 2 is one of them that is being applied in this situation, it says the elevation can be increased to the extent necessary to reasonably protect the dwelling from groundwater intrusion. So it doesn't have anything to do with resale value or anything to do with preference. It's what needs to be done to protect it from groundwater. Now, granted, I agree. I think 7 feet's a little low, but personally, I think 8 feet's adequate. But I think it is something to keep in mind, that we're not here to, basically, this is the rule in the city is not above 1 foot over the existing home's elevation. So this is an exception that's being applied. And I guess, like somebody said earlier, we don't take it lightly, and we should consider all these facts and not just let them drift by.
My own perspective is that we have to look at this in the context of what the overall purpose was. And if this was our, modest as it was, our attempt to try to deal with the McMansion issue, and it was trying to deal with evading the height limits that we have and prohibiting new construction from just being lifted up off the ground to a point where, even though it technically satisfied the height limits, it was really building a house that was out of scale with the rest of the neighborhood. And so I'm a little reluctant to set a hard and fast ceiling height in the basement at this point. And I think the kinds of things that the applicant has done here in terms of not going all the way to the 35-foot height limit make me more amenable to approving the application. And I think that kind of case by case might not be a bad way to approach these. Further discussion. Commissioner Schroeder.
I just wanted to talk about two things relative to the conditions we're looking at, particularly Condition 2 and 4. Condition 2 says the first floor elevation may be increased to the extent necessary to reasonably protect the dwelling from groundwater intrusion. It makes the assumption that the only way to protect the dwelling from groundwater intrusion is to raise the first floor. There are other ways to protect a dwelling from groundwater intrusion. They may be more expensive, they may require other means, but there are other ways to do it. But that said, our fallback in all of this was to get to condition number 4, where we try and protect the neighborhood by assessing the height, mass, and scale. I asked the question about mass because we struggled with that during the massing study. We never came up with a solution. We had proposals. We actually proposed things to the City Council, and they were not accepted. And while I might ask the question, I didn't ask it just arbitrarily. I think that there is an answer. I think the problem is that the response is relative. It's the perceived size of a structure relative to the site that it sits on. So it will be different for every single structure, every single site we look at. So we have to look at each case individually. In this particular case, I think what was interesting is we had a proponent come through and measure the heights of lots of homes in the surroundings to try and demonstrate that it fits into the character of the neighborhood. Well, height is an absolute measurable thing, and it's not at all related to scale. And there's some relationship there. But I think what the applicant suggested is that the neighborhood is in transition. And when I look at the pictures that were submitted, and there were a lot of photographs of homes in the neighborhoods that were submitted, I think what I see is that there is a wide variety of massing of homes on properties here. And when I look at the elevation, the street front elevation of this, compared to what existed there before, it's an increase in the mass of the structure. When I look at it compared to the photographs of the homes that are in the neighborhood, the homes that have changed, it's not really that different than most of the homes that have been changing. So I think I go back to our fallback position in all of this is, does it still fit the character of the neighborhood in height, mass, and scale? And my thought is that it does fit the character of the neighborhood, and in particular, as we look at it in terms of the changing character of the neighborhood and the mass of this relative to the mass of other homes in the neighborhood.
Any further comments or questions? If not, I'd entertain Commissioner Scheer.
Carrie, I have a question for you. One of my concerns with raised basement heights is what we were attempting to address when we changed the code to begin with, which is, and it was mentioned by the gentleman earlier in public comment, which is the raising of the elevation of a subject property such that its floors become really out of line with other houses that are nearby or in the neighborhood, where you're looking into someone's basement from your first floor. Now, if I want to just state this, the proposed house will have a first floor elevation of 869.05, is that correct? Okay. And I would note that the house to the north, if I'm reading all the plans correctly, has a first floor level of 868.4. The one to the east is 860.9. So the one to the east is going to be a little more, radically affected in this way. The one to the north virtually unaffected at all by the raising of the floor, and there's some compulsion in that in terms of my vote. Thank you.
Other comments or discussion? If not, I'd entertain a motion. Commissioner Carpenter.
I would move to approve this application based on the staff report, comments by the commissioners, and the public testimony.
Do I have a second? The motion has been made and seconded. Let me just note before we vote on this or have further discussion, there were some additional email communications that were submitted. We got an email from a gentleman by the name of Tim Smalley, who lives at 5521 Deaver Drive, as well as an email communication from Molly and Tim Rye, who live at 55... Let's see, where are they at? They're at 5528 Woodcrest. That's the one just to the east. Richard and Mary Jean Weigel at 5501 Oaklawn submitted comments, as did Jennifer Sheffert, who lives at 5600 Woodcrest. So Mark and Jennifer Sheffert. I just wanted to make that note for the record. So any further discussion on the motion? Commissioner Schroeder.
Mr. Chair, I just have a clarification on the motion. The motion was to approve. We're actually recommending that the City Council approve.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
So the motion is to recommend that the City Council grant a conditional use permit per the staff report and recommendations and findings. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion passes. And Carrie, I'm sure you'll be notifying the applicants as to when that appears on the City Council agenda?
Yeah, this will go to the City Council next Tuesday.
Oh,
the
it'll be
council
on
is
that.
not meeting on July 3rd, so we're stepping it up a little bit.
Okay, so Mr. Busen and Ms. Schmidt, it'll be next Tuesday. Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is a conditional use permit to construct a new home 1 foot above the first floor elevation of the existing home at 4805 East Sunny Slope for Doug and Abby Power. Ms. Ocker.
Thank you. Mr. Chair and Commissioners, the subject property is located at 4805 Sunny Slope Road East. It is a conditional use permit request to allow the first floor elevation of a new home to be 4.68 feet higher than the existing first floor of the home to be replaced 3.685 feet higher than allowed by ordinance due to the floodplain elevation imposed on the property located along Sunny Slope. Doug and Abby Power are requesting a conditional use permit to tear down an existing home and construct a new home at 4805 East Sunny Slope, as indicated here. It's almost a peninsula lot. It backs up to Minnehaha Creek Mill Pond, and also the creek wraps around along the south side. The only interior lot line is the common lot line between the subject property and the property sort of northwest. It is a conditional use permit request to allow the first floor elevation of the new home to exceed the first floor elevation of the existing home by more than 1 foot. The applicant is proposing to raise the first floor elevation over 4 feet above the existing floor. Based on the first floor is currently at 895.91 feet with an allowed increase in height by code to 896.91 feet. The proposed first floor will be at a height of 900.58 feet. This is a more detailed aerial photograph of the property. This is the property with the 100-year floodplain imposed upon it. The floodplain does overlap the property and does affect the building area. The ordinance requires that all basement low floors be elevated a minimum of 2 feet above the flood protection elevation. The existing basement elevation of the home is at 887, or 1.1 feet below the flood protection elevation. The proponents are proposing a basement elevation of 890.1 to comply with the minimum floodplain requirements. The protection elevation is at 888.1. They must be 2 feet above that with their lowest floor. The builder has provided examples of other homes that they're going to pattern this home after. This is actually the survey that's being proposed for the site. This is the floor plan of the first floor. What you'll notice is that the main house is towards the south. There's a connection link to a side loading garage that is towards the north with the driveway coming in closer to the north lot or northwest lot line. This is an elevation that's being proposed of a concept elevation of the home. Again, the main portion of the house towards the south, a one-story connection to a lower garage area that's closer to the north side. These are photographs of similar homes that were built within Edina that are of the style built by the builder, that architect that would like to design this home to completion. This is a listing of the homes. I just gave a small sampling of the surrounding homes and the different housing styles that occur within the neighborhood. You were given, I think, just about every home within the neighborhood, photographs of those, but this is the subject home currently. It's a rambler. This is the house that's adjacent to it that shares the common lot line. It's to sort of the northwest. This is the house west of that. It's a story and a half, very different style. This is the house that's across the street on the west side of East Sunny Slope. It's a 2-story home. This is the one just south of that. And south of that, again, along the west side of East Sunny Slope, it's a rambler. And then you have another 2-story home just south of that. This is the house that is on the east side of Sunny Slope, sort of across that mill pond area that wraps along the south side of the house. Again, a lot of different housing styles, lots of topography within the neighborhood. This, again, is the existing house that they wish to tear down and replace. The existing property is 37,550 square feet, contains a rambler that was built in 1953. It is located within a special flood hazard area from the mill pond. It is also subjected to 50-foot setbacks from the creek. The existing house is closer to the creek than 50 feet. It's currently non-conforming, so they will be pulling the house closer to the street and further away from the creek, and they will meet all of the other requirements in terms of setback, height, and lot coverage. Regarding the general conditional use permit requirements, the property must not have an adverse impact on governmental facilities, utilities, services, or existing or proposed improvements, that it will not generate traffic within the capacity of the street serving the property, does not have an undue adverse impact on the public health, safety, or welfare, and will not impede the normal and orderly development and improvement of other property in the vicinity, that it would conform to the applicable restrictions and special conditions of the district in which it is located, and that is consistent with the comprehensive plan. This property will actually be improved from what's currently there, given the fact that the existing basement is lower than the flood protection elevation. They'll be elevating it above that, which is a requirement. They would have to be 2 feet above, which they are proposing to do. So they would meet all of the general requirements for conditional use. The additional conditions, again, we have the 3 criteria that one would have to be met, or 3 conditions, they must choose one, which happens to be the first one, which would be the first floor elevation must be increased to extent necessary to elevate the lowest level of the dwelling to an elevation 2 feet above the 100-year flood, which is what they are proposing. And then the condition number 4, increase of the first floor elevation will only be permitted if the new structure or addition fits the character of the neighborhood in height, mass, and scale. Conditions 1 and 4 do apply, and they will meet both of those conditions. The applicant would like the home to have 9-foot ceiling heights in the basement and 8 to 9-foot basement ceiling height within the single-family home in Edina is typical, especially in new construction, even though the minimum building code would require a 7-foot height. The maximum building height for this particular lot, because it is a larger, wider lot, is 40 feet. They are slightly below that overall building height, so they do maintain they are below the maximum height requirement. They are well within the setback requirements, and they will improve upon the minimum setback required from Minnehaha Creek. The primary issue is the proposed new home with a first floor elevation 4.68 feet higher than the existing home are reasonable. For the site, staff does believe the proposal is reasonable. The proposal meets the general requirements for the conditional use permit. The proposal meets all of the minimum zoning ordinance requirements. Because of the 100-year floodplain elevation for Minnehaha Creek, the applicant cannot dig down lower to build a basement and meet the code requirement that the first floor elevation for the new home not exceed 1 foot above the first floor elevation of the existing home. The proposed home is in the character of the neighborhood. There are a variety of housing styles, as I indicated with the previous photos, as well as all of the other photos that were included in your packet. Staff recommends, the Planning Commission recommend to City Council to approve the conditional use permit for Doug and Abby Power for property located at 4805 East Sunny Slope Road. The conditional use permit allows the new home to have a first floor elevation 3.68 feet above the 1 foot requirement. Approval is based on the findings that the proposal meets the conditional use permit requirements and it meets all applicable zoning ordinance requirements. The new home is in character of the neighborhood, and any approval should be subject to the following conditions: that the site be developed according to the site survey date stamp May 14th, 2012, the building plans and elevations that were shown to you previously, that they submit a copy of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District permit. The city may require some revisions to the approved plans to meet the district requirements, and that the final grading and drainage plans are subject to review and approval of the city engineer. And with that, I will stop and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chris. So just so that we're squared away here, so this is unlike the last application, this is relying on the FEMA floodplain map, correct?
That's correct.
And so that criteria talks about the extent necessary to get 2 feet above what they consider to be the 100-year flood event.
Correct.
And so FEMA has set the 100-year flood event at 888.1.
0.1, that's correct.
And so the proposed slab for the basement would be at 891.
0.1, to comply with that requirement.
And then we're going from there.
That's correct.
Okay. So with that, questions for Ms. Acker? All right, hearing none.
I do have one.
Commissioner Schroeder.
The staff report says 890.1. This is a really minor detail, but it is different.
90 and 1 inch.
You're right. There's a difference. So which one are we actually looking at? Are we looking at starting at 890 feet 1 inch or 890.1?
Yeah, because the drawing B submitted by the applicant that has has all the elevations, talks about 890 feet 1 inch, which I assume is a above sea level measurement.
I guess I would request they clarify that.
Sorry?
That they would clarify that? If they're showing that on the plans, then that's what the request is for.
Okay, well, maybe we can ask the applicant about that.
Yeah, I think we should. Thank you.
Further discussion or questions? All right. Can the applicant come up and just introduce yourselves and give your name and address?
Hi, my name's Doug Power. This is my wife, Abby. This is Dave Wissink. He's our builder from Elevation Homes, and this is Travis on the building team. The one other person I'd like to introduce is Chuck Booty in the back row. He's the gentleman who we're in the process of purchasing the land from. We moved to, my wife, Abby, and I currently live at 4620 Drexel Avenue with our 2 children, Josh and Owen, who are 9 and 11, as well as Abby's dad. We moved here last August from Chicago so I could work at General Mills, where I currently work. We're renting our house on Drexel Avenue, and we've been looking around Edina trying to find the perfect place for us to build a house so we could stay in Edina and so our family could live here for a long time. We think we found that property. We're really excited to build this house and join the Sunny Slope community. We've gone around the neighborhood and we've talked with a number of the neighbors, and we feel that they're excited for us to join the neighborhood too, so we're hoping that this is allowed to move forward.
Well, welcome, Mr. and Mrs. Power. So is it Mr. Wissink, is that correct?
That's correct.
You want to share a little bit of how you're thinking through this?
Sure. So essentially I don't know how familiar you guys are with our company, Elevation Homes, but we've been building in the Edina area for the last 5 years. We're part of a Streeter & Associates, who's a custom home builder. Been doing work for about 27 years in the metro area. Our work has predominantly been infill work, and so some of the photo examples that you've seen are representative of what we anticipate this home would look like. The shingle style, architecturally designed. In fact, the gentleman, the architect that did the project design was of TEA2 architects previous to him going on his own. And so the nature of that architecture is kind of similar to what we anticipate for this home. What we've done is we've tried to design a 1.5-story shingle style home where the roof line actually extends down and creates a datum line to keep the overall height and mass down scale-wise. And then the link to the garage, and the garage is below the first floor significantly. And so that way what we do is we try to taper down the site to the adjacent home to the west. And then subsequently to the south side, there is no home, it's just the creek. And so we're just working with the topography and pushing our what I would call our walkout level to the creek side. And so that's where your visual is. And so subsequently we try to create space between the neighbor to the west and then keep the house as close as we can to the setback to the south. And so by doing that, we try to maintain, if you look at the site plan overall, a nice separation overall between the adjacent home and our structure, and then subsequently backing up as close as we can to the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District, which is 50 feet. Given the conditions that we are working with currently with the floodplain, we do have to elevate the first floor, and so subsequently we're trying to work the design as best we can within the existing topography of a walkout lot. And so we meet all the conditions of the city code despite those parameters that we're dealing with. And so with that, we present the design that's before you.
So to the question that came up just a minute ago, and I'm kind of referring to this drawing. I don't know if, Sherry, if we have that on the screen or if we want to put that on the table. It's kind of a helpful document to just for everybody to be on the same page. Yeah, that's good if we can kind of zoom in a little bit on that. So I think this is a document you created, right?
Yeah, our architect did.
Right. So we're looking at 888 feet 1 inch as the 100-year floodplain, and then 2 feet above that, which is that 2 feet described by our code, is 890 feet 1 inch. And going to Commissioner Schroeder's question, that's inch, not 0.1 foot, correct?
I think the way that we've got it in the FEMA document, it shows it at 888.1.
Okay, so it is a 0.1 instead of the 1 inch.
However, we need to be at least 2 feet above.
Okay.
So we would, if we think of that, probably the best way to show it on there was probably 888.1, but we would want to be at least 900.1. So you could do 890.1 inch.
I don't want to split the hairs too finely.
Yeah.
We might as well all get on the same page. All right, so then from that 890.1, can you just kind of walk us up to the top of the building from there? How do you go at that? So how many feet for the basement, and then where's your finished first floor, and how are we doing this?
Yeah, so essentially what happens, because it's a walkout site, we're actually, the average grade is where they measure building height from. And so if you think about that relative to where the existing front door is now, we're actually put in a position where, I don't know how to say this except to say that we're kind of penalized from a building height standpoint.
So your building height measurement starts from a place below where the building emerges from the ground in some places anyway?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. In terms of the datum line, we are asking for 9-foot height ceilings. I think, to be honest with you, it ended up being about 8'10". So similar, if you looked at the past application that was just here and they said 8 3/4, I bet you their floor-to-floor height was very similar to ours. When you add what you have is an 18-inch floor truss that you have to deal with, plus you have the subfloor, and you have an additional 3/4-inch hardwood floor. So when you take all those things into account, your basement ceiling height, what we requested 9 foot, probably be very close to 9, but it may be like 8'10", something to that extent. So you're going from 890.1 to 900.7? That's right.
And that includes the space, which you're saying might be 8'10".
Correct. Yeah, if you take the distance between those, that'd be 10 foot 6 inches. You take an 18-inch floor truss out of there, and then another 1.5 inches for subfloor and the wood floor, and it gets you around 8'10".
I'm learning all kinds of things about structural engineering. Okay.
And sheetrock. Yeah.
Now, talk to me a little bit about the overall height. So on the far right-hand side of the drawing, the number that you probably can't see on the screen is 40 feet. So from the average existing grade to the top of the highest peak is 40 feet.
That's correct.
So talk to me about how that fits in with our code.
Yep. So on a site of this scale, so the site is 0.86 acres. On a site of this scale, the maximum height can be 40 feet.
To the ridge line?
Correct.
Okay. And we don't do, Carrie, we don't do midpoint of the roof line, or how do we measure that?
We do it both.
And either or, whichever one you can satisfy, or you have to satisfy both?
You have to satisfy both.
Okay. And so what is it, 35 feet to the midpoint?
Correct.
So you can't do such a steep pitch that you'd be above 40 feet, even if you were at a 35-foot midpoint. Okay.
And I think if you look at the scale and how it's scaled with the roof line, what we try to do is there's a datum line where the dormer comes out. That's an additional step back, basically, and so what that allows that to do is it breaks up the overall massing of the roof and bringing down the scale of it. It's similar to some of the other homes that we've done like that, where it just breaks down the scale. And when you look at it in elevation, obviously that's a 2D drawing, but when you look at it and you drive by those other homes that we've done, and you look at the pictures, the photographs of those homes, you can see obviously the roof pitches back, and then that doesn't give that appearance of, just a vertical roof, if that makes sense.
And is it, on this two-dimensional drawing here, you show that average existing grade. I assume it tapers off to the back. When you say walkout, it's lower in the back toward the water?
Yeah, so subsequently, because of the existing topography of the site, they measure the average grade based on that.
So it would be lower than that average grade in the back?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So the current walkout of the site, the current walkout level of the existing home is 887.
Okay. All right. Sorry to monopolize that question. I just wanted to kind of set the table there. Other questions for the applicant? Commissioner Forrest.
I guess I'm just noticing that the house immediately to the north there, what's going to happen is that the grade line, it looks like at the corner of their house is 890, and their driveway even a bit less than 890. So that is a situation where the bottom of their house is going to be equal to the bottom of the basement of the one next door. I'm not saying that's unavoidable. There is a discrepancy as far as between the two homes. There's going to be a slope, and you've got water issues to begin with, and city engineers, I'm sure, will address that, but it's a potential impact, I guess.
So I assume that's an engineering issue you're addressing in terms of drainage.
Yeah, do you want to speak to it?
I see your colleague nodding behind you. He must be the drainage engineer.
Hi, my name's Travis Finlay, and I'm a landscape architect working on the project. So I was charged with doing the preliminary grading plan for the submittal. Yes, because of the situation with the floodplain, we are kind of a little bit higher and raising some of the grades around there, but we're trying to mitigate that as much as possible. Hence the reason we're stepping the house from south kind of to the north. We are elevated a little bit to our neighbors to the north, and we have been meeting with that neighbor as well, just to kind of explain what's going on there, assuring them that we're working with the drainage. We're trying to appease them and make sure that the grading doesn't affect anything that they're doing. And it's just we're just trying to make the best of what we have to work with right now. So,
all right, thank you.
You bet.
Other questions or comments? All right, hearing none. Thank you. Don't go far away. Want to just ask for comments from the public. Any members of the public who are interested and would like to make a comment, this is the time to do it in the public hearing. So I'd invite anyone who's interested in sharing to come up and just state your name and address and tell us what's on your mind.
Hi, I'm Roxanne Lehman, and my husband Dan's a professor and teaches a late class tonight, so he's not with me. We are what I guess you would call the most immediate neighbor. We're at 4801 East. And we've met Doug and Abby Power, and we really like them. And we've met Nate Wissick, their contractor, and we really like him too. And today I met Travis Van Leeuwenhoek, and I also like him. And we saw their house plan. We think it's fine. We did become concerned when we saw the site plan and the side entrance driveway and the really large, what I think they're calling an auto court. And Nate was good enough to come out yesterday after I got to see the site plan, because Abby did, they showed the house, and I think we all think, that, as you saw in the pictures, we have a pretty eclectic neighborhood. There are lots of different styles there, and I think that's part of the loveliness of the neighborhood. But when we saw the site plan, we did become concerned about the auto court. That is, the only other neighbor that I shared the site plan with, I would say, for sure, is my neighbors immediately to the west of me, and I consider them sort of my parents. They're the only people in the neighborhood that are old enough to still be my parents. And they saw the auto court, and they said, oh my gosh, it's half the size of your house. So my concern, though, isn't just the size of the auto court, but its proximity to our house. So when Nate put the stake out, it's 10 feet from our dwelling. But the thing I'm most concerned about is that it's 5 feet. So I'm 5'2", and that's how big the incline would be from the drop to our property. So I'm concerned about that, and they've agreed to try to work with me to mitigate those concerns. So I'm concerned, though, about two things. The drainage, which has to be the primary concern, that we are in this 100 flood plain. We knew that when we bought the property 16 years ago. We thought it was worth, and we still think it's worth the risk. But I'm concerned that we already are dealing with that issue. The edge next to that property, the property next to us, their property is already elevated above ours, and that area stays soggy. So my concern is that if we have to worry about the creek coming in, and it has encroached, we've never had it in our house since we've lived there, but it has come onto the property, that if we have to worry about that and then the land is saturated and then we have water from their house, we'll be under. So I'm worried about that. They've assured me that they're going to make that not a concern, but I have to admit I am concerned about it. So that's our primary concern. The other concern is the aesthetics piece of it. That one thing your pictures didn't capture completely would be sort of the lovely, what I'd call spacious feel and the graceful flow of the land, and the space for green screenage between the properties. Almost every single property has space for that kind of green privacy in a sense that I think adds to the loveliness of the neighborhood. And I'm afraid that with the closeness to our dwelling, there isn't enough room for that. And again, they've agreed to work with me to mitigate that, but I have to, say that that is a concern. So I guess I'm looking at the situation and think I'd really like them to have what they want, because I really would like them to have what they want. But to try to do it in a way that wouldn't be at sort of a cost to my husband and me, and I think our immediate neighbors. That I don't think many of them or most of them have seen the site plan. So I think if they saw it, they would say that it had an encroaching feel. That I know legally it's not encroaching, but that's kind of how it would feel, I think, the way it is now. So I guess what I would ask for is maybe a conditional approval, that if you approve it and let it move forward because it meets all of the concerns, that maybe on the condition that they work with me. And we sort of had that conversation earlier today before we met with you tonight. So I appreciate the chance to sort of explain my concerns. And I've never been to one of these meetings, and I have to say I'm really pleased to see the sort of real thought that you all give, and can do it in sort of a way that's entertaining. So thank you.
Well, Ms. Lehman, before you run away, thank you for your comments. And I just wanted to ask, with respect to that 4800 site, which is right the other side of you, is it elevated above you?
So my immediate neighbors to the west,
right,
at 4800. So in fact, they were just talking to me about that today. So those are those parent-like neighbors. And they believe that they and we, and I would say this is probably right because I can see them when I'm in my office. I can see this little build-out that they have. We kind of look at each other sometimes when they're in there in the evening and I'm working at the evening. They're even with us. So they think that our property, their property, and the property just to the west of them, they think we're all about equal, and then this 4805 is higher.
Is higher, all right.
And actually, they're they've been in the neighborhood much, much longer than I have, and they actually said when you all had the flood in, was it 1986, where they said that this property, the 4805, was the only one in the neighborhood that didn't get water in their basement. So That's just a little piece of history.
Well, then that makes, I think, 2086 would be the 100-year flood again, wouldn't it? Guess it doesn't work that way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other public comment? All right, seeing none, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing. Second? Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, so the public hearing is closed, and let's return the discussion to the commission. Comments, questions, thoughts? Commissioner Fisher. You were reaching for the microphone.
I just blinked. This is like being at an auction. And no, that wasn't my ear twitch. I wasn't my
Sold.
I guess I was going to ask Commissioner Schroeder, just because you're a little more fluent with the grade, does this look feasible to you to get the grades, to get the drainage off on this piece of property?
Well, I was looking at the same point with the kind of the westerly point of the auto court and the retaining wall that's there and how they construct that. They are building up, which is always easier than building down and into the slope. The question, what I can't really tell from this is how exactly they're tying into the grades next to, on the property to the west. It looks like they're tying in to maintain a swale that runs along the property line, which is what we need, which is the kind of the minimal condition.
Right.
But it's hard to tell at the scale of the plan that I have.
Okay.
It looks like they're doing the right thing.
I mean, I would just say from a massing and scale, I actually like the way architecturally that the garage is broken apart, and assuming that, that's the way the design ends up, it breaks the scale down significantly, lessens the impact on the neighbors. To me, I sort of share the neighbors' concern that my concern would be the drainage and the actual impact of the site, not so much the building. The building isn't concerning me. So if that can be resolved, to me, it's not that onerous of an issue.
All right, so on that point, Carrie, just, one of the joys of being on the Planning Commission is I had a nice visit over at Starbucks when I was getting a cup of coffee the other day, and a friend of mine said that he watched one of our meetings about the drainage over on Grimes, where we kind of said, well, there's this neighborhood drainage pond, and he was a little critical of us just letting it off to the staff. And so, Carrie, I wanted to raise again the question of what happens here on drainage, just for folks watching at home as well as for the applicants and for the neighbor. If we were to approve this like we did in that house on Grimes, and we kind of add this condition about making sure the drainage gets taken care of, can you explain for folks, how does that work through the city system? Who does what to make sure that happens?
Yes, certainly. Our city engineering staff also gets a copy of the building permit, and they review the drainage as part of that to make sure there's no negative impacts on the neighbors. On this particular one, we did send the plans down to the city engineer. We didn't get specific comments back, but I think what I'll do before this goes to city council is sit down with the city engineer and make sure he comments on this directly for the city council.
So, as we're moving forward, and we haven't taken action or recommendation on this yet, but if Ms. Lehman is looking for ways that she can be assured that her drainage issues are getting taken care of, it sounds like you're saying that's a staff issue that the city engineer would be addressing, and that addressing that between now and the city council meeting might be a good way to make sure that all of the parties have some satisfaction about the way that's going to happen. I mean, just in my experience, that's one of those ongoing drainage issues you never want to have between neighbors. It just creates unhappiness all the way around. So it's better to fix it now than wait till later. Commissioner Carpenter.
Just on that note, Carrie, can you clarify just exactly what we're trying to achieve with respect to drainage? In other words, is there a municipal requirement that for purposes of developing a residential site that there can be no additional drainage onto adjoining properties?
That is my understanding, that we can't create a situation that's going to direct more drainage to the adjacent property owner that exists today.
So this goes to the engineer, and the engineer makes a determination that it does not adequately address that. What's the outcome then?
More engineering.
More engineering. Oftentimes, they're going to try, if at all possible, to make the situation better. If there's a problem now, they'll want to try to divert more drainage away. More often than not, they're going to create a situation that improves any problem that might be out there.
I think that the standard is that you can't increase the rate of runoff. So there's a certain, it's kind of the amount times the time. But I think that's something that we want to make sure is clarified between the time that this leaves here and goes to the city council, so that everybody's on the same page about that issue. Other comments or discussion? Commissioner Platterder.
Kind of along the same vein there, it seems there, with that slope and once you get into the swale, how are you going to landscape that to put a barrier in there? Is that, do you have I didn't see it in here, maybe I missed it. Was there a landscaping plan that was going to address that? It just seems like unless you're planning on building on somebody else's property, I don't know if you'd have enough to really screen that through there.
We've been talking about screen plantings with the neighbor as well, just to kind of her concerns about seeing the garage and everything like that. And our proposal right now is to put some larger trees, coniferous trees potentially, in that barrier between our property and well, actually on our property side, to screen that auto court. There is a pinch point, and it is the south kind of west corner, and that's the one that's kind of closest. It's 5 feet away from the property line, and that's kind of where we're setting our drainage point, where we're kind of picking up and going to the creek and to the street. So that's kind of what set our ridge line, and we're working to mitigate any way, shape, or form. I've done other instances where we've kind of added other infrastructure underground, such as a French drain, dry well systems, just to kind of mitigate any water that does happen to get down to that area as well. So we talked about all those scenarios, and ultimately our goal is to kind of work with the adjacent homeowner and make sure we're working with the engineering department to make sure we get what everybody is peaceable with. So,
Commissioner Schroeder.
As long as Mr. Van Leer is standing up there, the water from the auto court, is that internalized and brought out somewhere else, or how does it work relative to the retaining wall that's kind of along the northwest side?
It's dependent upon if we do a paver system, our goal would be to kind of have it infiltrate into the paver system. If not, if we do, it depends on how the budget meets too. If we do a hardscape paver, I explained to the previous neighbor, we would probably change our grade so that everything's a crown in the middle of the auto court, and it would pitch to the street and to the creek, so that it would not diversely go straight to the neighbor's property. Everything's kind of going away from.
Because when you look at more closely as I look more closely at the grading plan, that's the issue. It's where the water from the auto court's actually going, and if it can be directed away from the property line, that will help considerably. So the issue right now is they're taking the grades from the gently slope towards the west property line now, and they're extending those out and dropping them off more quickly. So there is a potential for more water getting into that swale, or actually not getting into that swale because it's coming off of the slope so steeply. If we can avoid having the auto court water, the runoff from the auto court and from the roof of the garage that's facing in the westerly direction, from going off in that direction will help considerably.
Yep, and there's also going to be drain tile behind the wall and everything too. So it's these different layers of, in a sense, kind of creating a barrier to help mitigate that water out of sight. So. Yep. Yes. Yep.
Further comments or questions? Thank you. Commissioner Forrest.
I guess when I look at this too, I am somewhat concerned about the proximity of the auto court to the neighboring house as well, and the impact on the neighbors, again, necessitating a steeper slope there. I don't know if it's, when the garage and the auto court combined are about 50 feet, which is an inner city block or lot size. So it's significant width there that is being maintained. There would possibly be other ways to do that. I don't know I like the way it looks now. I don't, and maybe a front-facing garage could, without the auto court, could make a difference, but it would certainly impact the look of the plants. So, but I am concerned about the proximity as well as the water issue, just the visual proximity.
Commissioner Schroeder.
One of our criteria is number 4, and we deal with the mass again. And where the previous applicant had shown elevations all the way around the building, we don't have that in our packet with us tonight. But I guess, Planner Teague, I have a question. We have been talking about mass as perceived from the public right-of-way. How do we deal with it from the perspective of the creek? Because certainly that's a public way, and the mass of the structure might be different, and we don't know because we don't have the drawings, it might be different than what we're seeing here. And if one of our criteria is to say that there's no negative impact in the character of the neighborhood based on the mass, and we don't have all of the elevations, how do we make that comparison?
Good question. Without that information, it's difficult. You're right, we did concentrate on the street. If the commission's not comfortable with that finding, you could table the request and have the applicant provide those elevations.
I look at Minnehaha Creek as an important waterway and recreation resource in our community. It's also a way that, as you move through this neighborhood and as you look at how homes are expressed to their neighbors, the view across the creek becomes important. And without having those elevations to demonstrate what we're actually looking at, I think it's actually difficult for us to make a considered and fair decision on this.
Mr. Wissink?
I have the other elevations, and I can get them for you if you want me to grab them. They're in my car.
It's one way to do it. Sure.
Okay.
Sounds like people are amenable to that. Right. Yeah.
So just to, while we're waiting.
Yes.
Just to
Scherer.
clarify for those at home and to make sure that I'm clear, we're talking about the homes that would be on Browndale across the creek from the subject property.
Well, that's a good question. Carrie, can you tell us what street that is? It's across the creek? Those are the backs like 4601, 4603, 4605. Are they on Browndale?
You doubted me?
No, I was...
It would be Browndale.
Oh, they are on Browndale, all right. Or on Sunnyside. Some on Sunnyside, some on Browndale. Okay. And then Browndale Park. Okay. That's right. I was looking at the aerial photos, which didn't show the street. Never doubted you.
You know, if I could ever get through Hopkins without swamping my kayak, someday I'd like to just kind of paddle by here. I think you can. This is actually an open waterway from here to Lake Minnetonka, is it not?
Yes, it is.
Other comments or questions or discussion about the mass and scale on the front? I mean, are people comfortable with that? Or are they? I mean, I do note a distinction between this and the last one that we saw is that it is. I think it was you, Commissioner Platter, who said that you noted that it wouldn't. The finished height of that project wasn't as high as they could have gone even with the relief. This one does go to the peak, right? So it's beyond what it could be if it wasn't given the relief from the first floor. Okay. Yeah, and I'm sure Mr. Wissink can elaborate on this, but we are talking, the difference here, I think, is this average existing grade as well. Oh, is it? Any further testimony? Anyone else who'd like to comment? Mr. Moody.
As long as there is a moment of silence.
As long as we're tap dancing here.
Yeah.
Help us out.
Any entertainment we can be provided.
You know,
Can you just state your name and address?
my name is
the
Chuck
record?
Moody, and the current owners of the property there. And I think as it relates to the backside, I think what you also have to realize is those houses on the back are actually taller houses than what this is. I mean, the structure, how that's going to open up, the houses there are actually three-level houses on the back side there.
Across the creek.
Across the creek in many ways. And so and the height level is such that they're above this particular area as well. So there's a fairly decent fall down from what's going on there on Sunnyside, looking back to this particular property. So I think I don't see that given the way that they have architected the property, that I don't see that really being that big of an eyesore versus other structures on the other side that I think actually have more mass than what this one will from a height standpoint. But again, that's my opinion. There's no validation to that. I guess all I would say is that given what that structure looks like today, that this is a wonderful opportunity to upgrade a really neat piece of property. And I think the neighbor's comments were very much right on. I love the way that she presented it as far as the concern on drainage and all that's going with it. But I think that this is a large piece of property that could have had a much larger piece of building that went on it. And I think that they've tried to be appropriate in the size of the structure and to try to make it fit within other structures that are in the area. And I think they've done a beautiful job with that. So that would be my commentary.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, Mr. Wissink, you're on. Maybe just even on the center table there, and we can all look at them together.
Which elevation would you guys like to see?
I think people are looking for the rear that as you would be looking at it from across the creek. Thank you.
So in some ways, it's a mirror of the front.
Commissioner Schroeder.
So, do we have these drawings as a part of our record? I wasn't questioning whether this would work. I was suggesting we don't have all the information we need to render a decision. And I'd be reluctant to pass this on to the City Council without having these haven't been made a part of the public record. And actually a part of their actual application.
All right, so I'll ask a question that I know the answer to, but what's the urgency here? What's the timetable?
Doug, you want to speak to that?
Sure. So as I had mentioned before, we're renting a place on Drexel.
How do you like it?
And, our lease expires next April. So if we were to start building right now, we already have a timetable problem. So we're hoping that our current landlords will be understanding if we had to stay another month or two. Our current landlord is likely to try to sell the house starting next year, and my sense is that if she gets a buyer starting May 1st, we're going to have a conversation about us moving out. So we're anxious to break ground as soon as possible to minimize that issue.
So you're looking at next spring finishing? Is that the...
Well, it's likely to be after that already.
Right, okay.
So we're hoping that...
So your lease, you're renting the house through May, or through April of next year? Okay, so that's what we're kind of up against. Carrie, if we were to continue this, our next meeting is when? 27th of June?
Yeah, June 27th.
And when is the next council meeting then after that?
The council is not meeting on July 3rd, so their following meeting would be July 17th.
So it would be July 17th instead of, currently they're going to hear them on June...
Next Tuesday.
19th, June 19th, so it's a month.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question?
Commissioner Fisher, and then we'll come back to Commissioner Schroeder.
I guess I'm confused why something that's shown to us at a meeting can't be entered into the public record. We enter comments, we add recommendations to staff recommendations. We did it twice tonight. This is simply a graphic that should be able to be entered into the public record via our final recommendation, I would think.
Commissioner Schroeder.
And that was going to be my thought as well. My whole thing was we don't have all the information we normally have in considering a conditional use permit. It's been provided to us tonight. It hasn't been made a part of the public documents available for review, but it doesn't sound like anybody stepping forward has any concerns about that. So I guess my question to Planner Teague is, can we accept these documents tonight as an amendment to the application and allow this to proceed forward to the City Council
I would
next week?
think that we could, sure.
So it would be important to make sure that we have copies of those in the official record, having seen those. And then that can be part of the packet that's passed on to the council as far as their evaluation. Other comments from the commission? And you know what? I thought I'd closed the public hearing before. Didn't we? All right.
Sorry.
It was deja vu. Oh, I've closed too many public hearings. So I don't have to do that again. All right. All right. Commissioner Forrest.
I was wondering if we could see an elevation of the north or west view.
Oh, the
of
one
home.
facing the neighboring property?
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
Look all the way around.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll give you what I have, okay? And so, I have so when the architect did it, he did 4 sides of the home. And so I don't have a specific garage elevation, but I do have, this is the elevation facing them, and here's the link right here. And then the garage obviously would be, somewhere in this vicinity. I'm having a hard time here.
So that's the elevation without the garage there?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And then this is the stairwell right here to the second floor. And then on the south side, facing the long view of the water, this is the walkout side.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
So that's the one facing where there is no house?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And then obviously you guys, this is the front.
Is there an elevation that shows the garage facing on, the northwest side? You don't know?
Yeah, I don't have a garage.
I know you don't have it right now,
Yes.
but does it exist?
It does not exist.
Okay. Further comments? Commissioner Forrest.
I guess if we move this forward, I would like to attach maybe some official recommendations as well, or additional comments to our recommendation to the council, beyond just what's in the public, record of the meeting. And specifically, my concern is that they evaluate the difference in the elevation altitude-wise.
Keep track of this. This is sounding like a motion.
Between the two homes, and the potential drainage issues and the visual impact on both the neighbor and the public right-of-way that is known as Minnehaha Creek, as Commissioner Schroeder described it.
Further discussion? Do you care to put that into a motion?
If I don't have to repeat it.
All right, so maybe I'll try and repeat it. So I assume, here's what I'm hearing you say, that we recommend approval of the conditional use permit application per the staff report and findings with the additional concerns expressed regarding ensuring that drainage is adequately handled between this property and the neighboring property on the same side of Sunny Slope, and that all of the elevation drawings are included within the record that goes to the City Council Am I missing anything?
And that they consider the visual impact on the neighbor and on Minnehaha Creek,
They being,
the council, that be part of their consideration, which ties in with having the elevations as part of the record, but that's
well,
a
I think,
concern.
so I guess my only quarrel with that is that I think they're asking us what we think.
Well, we said we were concerned, but we don't have we haven't had the materials, we don't have an elevation of what the garage is going to look like from the neighbor's point of view. And so I guess that's why we want those elevations in the record, right? Is to consider visual impact as well?
Well, I think we have them in the record now.
Right.
So.
But that's why, they're part of the record, but so are our comments. But our comments aren't specific recommendations to the council. So
My only point is I think that they're going to want them. I mean, that's what they look to us for, as for some recommendation about whether we think this satisfies the mass and scale requirement of the fourth condition. Commissioner Scherer.
We are missing one drawing, which is the one that would include the garage, which is the most direct, has the most direct bearing on the closest neighbor. And I think if I were a council member, I would want that to be included by the time I reviewed the packet.
Are you comfortable forwarding it without us having considered that?
I suppose it depends on our vote.
Anybody else can help me? Commissioner Fisher.
I'm just looking at, a diagram overhead version on a survey map, but it looks to me like the adjacent neighbor, we're looking at your garage on that side of your property, correct? So it's a garage-to-garage adjacency here, which I think makes a big difference. I think the clarification that we should make is when we're looking at a typical variance or we're looking at some of these plans, sometimes it's very much the details of the design, the elevations. In this case, we're really talking about scale, mass, and I'm very comfortable with what I'm seeing, that the mass of what they're doing is going to work, the scale is going to work. I'm getting a sense that maybe from the design perspective, every detail isn't worked out, and there might be a little nervousness about here's the elevations that we're going to live with forever. But generally, what I'm seeing, I think at least I'm comfortable that I understand what that mass is.
Ms. Power, did you have a comment you wanted to make?
I mean, a little bit of
Could you just come up? We can't hear you. We can hear you
better.
better.
The difference between us and the last applicant is that Mr. Moody's still the owner of the property. We are in contract with him.
Sure.
But so we've done put a lot of effort and money behind this so far, but we did that knowing that this might not work out. So we don't have every single detail ironed out in that way. And
sure, that
would be the explanation. So it wasn't left out purposely or anything like that. We haven't gone the whole way.
Oh, that's helpful information. Thank you for that. Oh, Ms. Lehman, come on back up. And welcome, Mr. Lehman. I'm glad we've dragged this out long enough for you to get here.
Kind of let his class out a little early. He's usually not home till 10. I guess all I would say is that's why I like the idea of having conditions built into this, because I think that the best they could demonstrate to me is that it is 10 feet from our garage, and you're right about that. The drop-off, I'm 5 feet too, so it's a significant drop-off. And it extends, the carport is huge, and it extends into our line of vision from our house. So you're right, I think it's more about how we feel when we enter our property. And I'm just asking to have some compromise happen so that it feels more graceful. So that's
Fair enough. Thank you.
It's about half the height of our garage. So you come out of our garage and you look at a wall.
Thank you. All right, Commissioner Schroeder.
The notion about these plans not being definitive works kind of counter to our approval. We're approving specific plans. In a conditional use, we have dimensional requirements that are indicated in these plans that we're approving. They haven't indicated materials. They haven't indicated, really the only thing they haven't indicated is materials. Everything else is dimensionally identified or determinable from these drawings. So we are approving a specific set of plans. If they change it, that's a change in the conditional use. That means they go through the process again.
Okay, now come on up.
No, I'm sorry. Then maybe you misunderstood me. I did not mean to say that we're changing them. These are our plans, but the reason we don't have that elevation of the garage is because
you didn't want to pay for one more elevation, not knowing whether you're going to get this done or not.
I mean,
I'm not being flip. I get what you're saying.
That's exactly it. I mean, we have that garage side elevation in the way that.
Right, but to Commissioner Schroeder's point, you're committed to these dimensions and to the heights and to the rest. It's not like that's going to change.
A very detailed budget. We are committed, completely committed. We have a contract with the property owner.
Good.
You know, we are fully committed. We've spent months doing these plans.
I understand.
They're 100% done. We just don't have some of the detailed drawings done.
Sure.
And we recognize that whatever we submit here is what we need to stick to. That was the idea of us going through all of this. So,
good. That's
sorry
good. That's good
about,
clarification right there. Thank you.
And that's on the record now.
I feel like emotion's coming. There kind of was one, but then I didn't. Commissioner Forrest, I didn't think you really
I'm going to withdraw it at this point.
I was trying, but I couldn't get
I didn't
there. You want to
agree
try
with you.
again? You didn't agree with me, and it was your motion.
I think I'm going to pass because
All right.
I'm increasingly concerned. I mean, I think absolutely there needs to be approval of a conditional use permit for this property because we have to have it. You have to, in order to build on the property, we need to raise the elevation. My concern is the way, and I like the plans just fine, but I am concerned about that northwestern side and the proximity to the neighbors and the potential effect of drainage. The fact that the proposed first floor elevation at 890 is the basement level. The basement slab elevation is at 890, and that's the grade level at the house next door. You know, pretty much the basement's above their first floor or equal to their first floor. And because it's so close and the drainage is so steep on that end of the house, I'm concerned about that. So I think in my opinion, I think there needs to be a CUP, but I'm not sure I can go for it unless I felt more comfortable with that side of it.
Can I just clarify? 4801 Sunny Slope has a garage floor elevation of 890, but the first floor elevation does not look to be the same elevation as the garage.
Okay.
So the first floor, the habitable space, would appear to be, we don't have it on a drawing, but it appears to be higher than the garage elevation. Just to be clear, I don't disagree with the things you're saying about the relative elevation, but the living space is actually elevated above the garage floor elevation.
So, Ms. Lehman, if you can come up, I'd like to, can you come up? And I just want to factually make sure we understand this, whether your garage is lower than your finished first floor.
So we have two floors, right? There's a walkout basement. It's considerably lower than our garage. And then, so the garage, we step up one step into sort of an entryway this is the side entrance, so it'd be next to the garage. So we step up one step out of the garage into this it's sort of a stairwell.
Then it's a split level from there, and you go down and
then
up.
we go down to the downstairs, which is fully finished. We just refinished, actually. We remodeled the house. And then up a half flight to the upstairs.
Okay.
So we're much lower
Your
ground for the basement level, which is our living, it's fully finished.
Is lower than the garage, but the next floor is higher than the garage. Okay. Mr. Winning.
Just to share a couple other things, just to make sure that we're clear on what's being deliberated here. This, by the way, I really like Roxanne and Dan as well. It's not a matter
Everybody
of
likes
who we
each
like
other.
each
That
other.
part we got established.
This is actually an elevation of between the properties, okay? And if we look at their garage height is 890. Their front door height is actually around 890, I think it's around 895.6 or 896, somewhere right in there, okay? So relatively from their garage floor to their front door height's about 5 to 6 feet, somewhere in that range, okay, to kind of give you an idea. As it relates to our site drawing, and I don't have a tighter one than this, but I think you guys have a copy of the survey, we are actually around 50 feet from the corner of their garage to the corner of our garage. So relatively, though it may appear from the diagram in 2D that we are very close, there is a pinch point, like Travis said. It's 5 feet, and Dan is correct. The wall at that level is 5 feet high currently. That's prior to us discussing how we might mitigate that, okay? However, there is a 50 feet separation, and by keeping the garage facing that way, we mitigate having actually the garage being closer to their structure, if that makes sense. So if you turn the garage to face the street, we deal with getting actually closer to their property line. And then we deal with the auto court facing the street, which is more of a challenge in our mind.
But then you wouldn't need an auto court.
Well, you still need some type of...
If you had a front
You still need a
facing.
pad, though, to get to the garages. Correct.
Oh, to the garage.
Yeah,
A pad, but it's not a side yard type, a paved side yard. I guess my concern is the proximity to the auto court, which is the hard surface that's raised by retaining wall, looks like around 20 feet or so. So that's pretty close. And if you're talking about using a retaining wall to jump down that steep slope, and granted, the garage on the neighboring house is a bit lower than the front entrance, but the grade all along the side of the neighboring house is around 890, which is the basement slab level that we're proposing. So I don't know. I want to recommend it to go forward. I do. Is there any way we can put a statement in there?
Here's my discomfort is, really the focus of our inquiry here is the structure, and we're spending a lot of time on the pavement that's next to the structure and the drainage, which are important issues, and I don't mean to minimize them, but they're not really the focus of the conditional use permit application. And so, well, how so?
Because the conditions that we're using is one that has to do with water level and drainage and all of that, and the impact on the property because of the water level to a certain extent. I mean, and also, well, anyway.
Commissioner Schroeder?
I was going to say, I think it actually is a fair consideration. If we were to grant the conditional use permit, we're raising the floor elevation of the home, which brings the garage elevation up, which brings the auto court up. So I think they're all interrelated, and I think it's a fair consideration. The issues relative to grading and drainage have typically been directed back to engineering department to make certain that they're not causing a problem for the neighbor. Our purview here is to deal with conditions 1 and 4 has been outlined in the conditional use permit. I believe it's 1 and 4. 1 is related to the FEMA floodplain elevation needing to be 2 feet higher than that, and the fourth one, again, is dealing with the height, mass, and scale. I think what I believe is that they have met the requirement for number 1 by raising it 2 feet as required in the conditional use permit. And I think with the additional drawings that were demonstrated, even though we don't have the westerly garage elevation, I think we can intuit that the mass of that elevation will be not substantially different than the other drawings that were presented to us tonight. And I would be comfortable trying to frame that into a motion that based on the additional information that was provided to us tonight, that we recommend to the City Council that they approve the conditional use permit for this property, and that the additional drawings that were provided to us tonight be submitted to the city and passed on to the City Council, not for consideration, but as part of the public record.
Do I hear a second? Further discussion? Commissioner Scherer? Commissioner Carpenter?
Well, to the point that we've been discussing here, is there any reason why we couldn't expand that just a little bit and require that plans be submitted to the city engineer to make a determination as to whether we have a drainage issue?
I hear an offer of an amendment. Is that acceptable to the mover and the seconder? Yes. Okay, so amending the motion to include that. Any further discussion?
We're just saying we really, really want it to happen.
Well, is the request that there be some kind of communication with the city engineer before the city council meeting? Is that the? I think that would really be helpful.
That's what we talked about a long time ago.
So that the motion is to have that, so that the city council has that in front of them when they consider this, they can understand this drainage issue.
Is that with the engineer's input? Is that what we're talking about? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes.
So getting it before the council meets.
Right. So that the council has this information and the analysis in front of them. Further discussion on that point. Commissioner Scheer.
I just wanted to make a statement. I really would encourage the Powers and their developer to work with the Layman's. I was really struck with what they're facing when we saw the last picture that you put up of the current view looking at the Layman's house and the very nice green slope that rises towards the subject property. And the thought of it being, I understand their concern, the thought of it being instantly bisected with a 5-foot stone wall really does pretty radically change some of the views from their property and the topography and the flow of the neighborhood. I don't know what the answer is. A front-facing garage might be part of the answer. You wouldn't need the retaining wall quite so heavily if you did that. That may be a design that's offensive to you. It might involve a lot more plantings, some other way that you could mitigate that. That'll be some increased expense. But I had sort of an instant bonding with them when I looked at that particular picture and thought of what a change there would be with your lovely property being created. And it is a beautiful design. It's a beautiful property.
Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, so the motion passes, and that motion with recommendation would go to the council at its meeting on June 19th. And it sounds like, given that that's 6 days away, you got some work to do with the city engineer, and fastest that can happen would be great. Thank you all for your patience. All right. Next item on the agenda is correspondence and petitions. I think there's a copy of council connection and attendance and council meetings, council minutes in here. I didn't see a council connection. I think we didn't get one this time, did we, Jackie? Well, I think it can be remedied at some future date. We were going to go through it line by line, but we can suspend that this evening. We have it submitted. And the attendance, it looks like our members are attending. That's good news. So with that, I'll move on to chair and commission member comments. Any comments from the commission members? Commissioner Carpenter.
I do have one comment. It goes back to earlier part of this meeting and to one or two of our prior meetings, and it relates to the variance issue and what we mean or what constitutes self-created issues. And this is a new provision that's only been recently added to the Minnesota statutes. It's been in existence, I think, for a long time in other states, particularly out east. And I wonder if it's possible if we could get some guidance from our city attorney as to just exactly how to apply that provision. Because the critique that's come out of it this time, as has, I think in some instances in the past, is very valid. I struggle to understand how to apply it, but it's there in the statute, and I draw the conclusion from that it's supposed to mean something.
Maybe it's time for another visit with the city attorney.
I think that's a good idea. It's been a while since we've had him in for a kind of a refresher. We've got some new commissioners, so I think it would be.
And have we changed the ordinance to make it conform to the new statute?
We have.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, it's a new standard, and we haven't done that kind of thing with him on that statute, so.
Sure. Why don't I work with you all offline, and we'll try to pick a date. We could have a work session maybe up in the community room.
Terrific. Other comments from the commission? Commissioner Fisher.
Question for Carrie. Did I see an email from you recently about an upcoming meeting regarding France Avenue? Is there something that we're supposed to be going to?
Yes. That is the, Commissioner Schroeder might be able to help me out with the date.
Or not.
It's working with the June 26th. Excellent. From 7 to 9 at the Public Works, at the new Public Works facility.
Can you tell us what it's about?
Yes, it's a stakeholders meeting. It's meeting number 2.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
It's with the Transportation Commission, and it's taking a look at the France Avenue corridor, where we have the grant, where we had, you may recall, we had the grant to construct a bridge over France Avenue, and we've changed the scope of that to examine the crossings at key intersections along France there. So it's to do some of the planning that goes alongside of that. And at the first meeting, those that were there thought it might be a good idea to invite the Planning Commission and get your input.
So that is June 26th at what time?
At 7 o'clock.
At the Public Works facility?
Correct.
The new Public Works.
The new Public Works
Very
facility.
good.
So what this tells me is I'm not the only one that only vaguely reads Carrie's emails and then
Busted.
wonders
We're all
about it
busted.
later. Like, did I get an email from Carrie?
Maybe a reminder, Carrie.
Yeah. Yeah, that might be a good idea, Carrie, just to send out an email reminder to folks.
Just one more time.
I
One
will
more
do
chance
that.
for us to ignore you.
I will do that because I put it on the calendar, but it
All right.
was drawn a blank when you brought it up.
Thank you. Thank you for retrieving that from the recesses of your memory. Other comments? All right, so I'm going to take the last comment to, it is my sad duty this evening to bid adieu to Commissioner Rock, who is, we made the last one a really good meeting for him. Commissioner Rock has been with us for a couple of years, and I, for one, have been just thrilled to have his participation. I have to say that we've had a lot of student members over the years, and I can't think of one who engaged with more enthusiasm than Commissioner Rock, right from the beginning, rather than just stumble along like many of us do, not quite knowing exactly what's going on when we first got here. He took the initiative to ask questions, to get guidance on kind of what the tools were that we were using, and was really an enthusiastic participant. And Matt, I was wondering if maybe you could share with the Commission where you're off to here for the rest of the summer and next fall.
I am going to the Northwest Territories and Nunavut for a canoe trip, and then I'll head to Williams College in the fall.
So this summer you will not be able to get the cable casts of our planning.
I will not be the 3 a.m. viewer.
All right. And Williams College in the fall.
Yes.
Congratulations. They are lucky to have you.
Thank you.
So thank you for your service to the community, and we look forward to you coming back and
hanging out in the audience.
Being in the audience, probably advocating for some applicant down the road.
You know, I bet
Commissioner Carpenter.
there are DVD replays, aren't they?
That's right.
We have a best-of selection.
We could ship them by sled dog to you. So thank you. In all sincerity, you've done a terrific job, and we wish you nothing but the best as you head off to Williams.
Thank you.
So with that, I think we've got the staff comments. Anything you want to share?
Nothing tonight.
Okay. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I would make a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second? We are adjourned. Thank you very much.
No vote, huh?